Chapter 1057. With just a thought, the things at the end of the world were also close at hand. Under the abnormal eye power of the Tensigen, everything was right in front of him. He actually forgot about the hatred between Shinigami and Quincy. This Quincy is really compassionate. Dustless secretly observed the situation. This kind of thing has nothing to do with him, so there's no need to meddle in other people's business. He just needs to find an opportunity to kill Ishin. Roar. The violent roar came again, accompanied by violent wind and waves. The central area was like an earthquake, and the ground was shaking and cracking, and the cracks were spreading rapidly. 1 meter, 10 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters. The cracks were getting bigger and bigger, and the exaggerated range was about to annihilate the whole world. The shaking gradually became farther and farther away, and the power did not weaken, but became stronger. Under Dustless's interested gaze, a monster with a knife, a mask, and a horn on its head was exposed under the sunlight. The most surprising thing was that this monster had a void hole, but it was blocked by a mysterious substance. Finally willing to come out? But its strength is really strong. Can the two of them deal with it together? Dustless had a big question mark in his heart. There was no doubt that the power of void, the great void in Shinozaki Ichigo's body, was beyond doubt. After erupting, it killed Vasto Lord Ulquiorra with overwhelming strength. Its strength was self-evident, especially when Ishin was seriously injured by Dustless. Overall, the situation was dangerous. "Are you okay?" Looking at Ishin's horrifying wound, Shinozaki Makoto rushed over and asked with concern. Her tone was as warm as the winter sun. "No, I'm fine, I won't die for the time being," Ishin said firmly, but his trembling body betrayed him, and his forehead was full of sweat. Seeing this, the kind-hearted Kurosaki frowned and quickly took out her handkerchief. Just as she was about to wipe the sweat off Ishin's forehead, a huge flash of light swooped down and interrupted her action. "It's Void Flash, get out of the way!" Ishin shouted loudly, and immediately stood up. His body was releasing Ryatsu, but the crack on his wound was getting bigger and bigger, and blood kept flowing. "The one who should get out of the way is you." Shinozaki Makoto resolutely stood beside Ishin, and many arrows were condensed from her fingers, aiming at the incoming flash. This little girl, Dustless, who was in the dark, looked at Shinozaki Makoto with shining eyes. From the fluctuations of Ryatsu and the skillful movements of the Quincy, she was definitely not weaker than Bambieta and Candace. By Shinozaki Makoto. Whoosh! A few divine arrows that were compressed by the spiritual particles were shot out. They rose from the ground and came into close contact with the falling flash. Boom! The power of the two moves was roughly equal, and they canceled each other out after the big explosion. Very. Ishin Shiba gave a thumbs up. Although the creature in front of him couldn't speak and could only growl, it was definitely not weaker than Vasto Lord. Shinozaki's, hers, S's, his, puff. At this moment, Shinozaki Makoto suddenly spat out blood. Her face was pale, and her body was on the verge of collapsing. Looking closely, a bloody mark appeared on her right shoulder. How surprising! This void is so cunning. Dustless was stunned. Others may not have seen the scene just now, but he saw it clearly. When the explosion occurred, a small red flash was spat out from Void's mouth. It was extremely fast, 20 times faster than an ordinary Void flash, but its power was greatly reduced. Using a Void egg to hit Shinozaki Makoto in the chaos. How cunning! Dustless sincerely admired Shinozaki Makoto. However, the next scene made Shinozaki Makoto, Ishin, and Dustless all petrified. How is it possible? This thing is just something made by Sosuke Aizen. How can it use that? He's not a Shinigami. Although it's a void made by a large number of Shinigamis, souls, it doesn't make sense for him to know Kido. And from the fluctuations of his Ryatsu, it's a high-level Heido. Dustless's heart was in turmoil. He didn't expect Void to know Heido. He had never heard of Shinozaki Ichigo before. Subai raised his right arm that was holding the bone broadsword, and a thick flash of light spread out. Even though White Void couldn't speak, Dustless still heard these words. Tao Breaker 88, Flying Dragon Strikes Thief Sky Shaking Thunder Cannon. Shinozaki Makoto and Isshin were injured, and they were like fish on the chopping board. They could only watch as the light engulfed them, and their hearts were filled with despair. Am I going to die? Damn it. Shinozaki Makoto raised a bitter smile and mocked herself. Her pretty face was full of unwillingness. No one wanted to die. Just when she had completely given up, a figure resolutely blocked in front of her. The thin figure was not worth mentioning under the light of destruction. The thin figure was unusually firm, and his eyes were indifferent. His pupils were calm and expressionless, as if he was looking at an insect. His eyes were full of unbearable bullying. Captain Dustless! Isshin was surprised, and the despair in her heart was immediately swept away. Captain? Shinozaki Mako's eyes widened when she heard that. She couldn't believe that the skinny man in front of her, whose skin was even smoother than hers, was actually a captain. Shinozaki Mako even suspected that Wuchen was shorter than her. But he was a captain. Dustless then raised his thin right arm under Shinozaki Makoto's incredulous gaze. You want to kill with a mere candlelight? Naive. The intimate pair of eyes suddenly widened. At the moment when the light beam fell, Wu Chen's right arm swept out, and the world that could destroy was easily shattered. The sky cleared up again. Chapter 1058. Shinozaki Makoto looked at the light that shattered in an instant with a shocked expression. That thick light beam was extremely fragile in front of Dustless, not even worth mentioning. Dustless raised his hand and scattered it. This guy can actually use Shinigami's Heido. Even Arcana Breaker can't do this. Looking at the palm of his right hand, Dustless felt that strange touch just now. He was sure that it was definitely Heido, not a violent attack like Void Flash. Oh, as if provoked, Void, who was floating in the sky, let out a terrifying roar. His ferocious eyes stared at Dustless with murderous intent. Dustless, Shinozaki Makoto, and Isshin all felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Be careful, he's very powerful, not an ordinary Minos Grande. Seeing that Dustless was indifferent, neither attacking nor defending, Shinozaki Makoto solemnly reminded. Powerful? Maybe. Looking back leisurely, Dustless stared at Shinozaki Makoto's bloody shoulder. His eyes flashed with ridicule as he turned his head and shouted, "Come at me, beast!" Hearing this, Shinozaki Makoto's expression changed greatly. She was so depressed that she almost vomited blood. Her words were to tell Dustless not to provoke Void, and not to call him a beast. You actually dared to provoke him on purpose. He's a conscious Minos Grande, not an ordinary one. Shinozaki Makoto said cautiously. She was sweating profusely and was very nervous. What are you afraid of? Looking at Shinozaki Makoto's eyes, Dustless said faintly, Do you think you can live if you don't provoke him? You're too naive, woman. You don't understand Void. It's impossible to be set free. This guy was sent to kill people. It's the same whether I provoke him or not. No matter what happens in the end, it's a dead end. Dustless said bluntly. Shinozaki Makoto was confused and didn't understand what he meant. He's coming. Seeing that White Void had disappeared, Isshin looked around and said in a deep voice, This guy is very unusual. He is very strong and his Ryatsu is also very strong. Especially his speed. Bang bang bang. Isshin Shiba's voice hasn't fallen yet. He saw Wuchen casually kick out, and a body suddenly flew out. Ka ka ka. White Void was sent flying by Dustless's kick. The powerful force caused him to smash through several buildings, and he fell into the ruins in a sorry state. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. How is that possible? So fast? Shinozaki Makoto exclaimed in shock. She didn't even see the entire process clearly. She only saw Wuchen casually kick White Void, causing him to suffer a heavy blow. His body was sent flying 100 meters away. They even took away a few buildings. Death God, let go of Jinho, or I'll kill your companion as well. A cold warning sounded out from the left as a silhouette walked out from the darkness. That person wore spectacles with killing intent in his eyes as he looked at the injured Kurosaki with a sinister expression. Ishida Ryuzo? Ripples appeared in Dustless's calm eyes as he recognized the person in an instant. He was Ishida Yulong's father. Oh, right. No wonder you came out to look for Kurosaki Makoto. She is now the daughter-in-law of the Ishida family. Dustless's eyes gradually regained their clarity. He glanced at Ishida Ryuzo and ignored him. He had nothing good to say to this cold guy. This guy, how dare he ignore me, damn it. Ishida Ryushin's face was filled with murderous intent. He flicked his wrist and formed a shining longbow. The arrow that was surrounded by cold air was aimed at Wuchen. Xiaolong, you misunderstood. Without his help, I would have been dead. Kurosaki Makoto explained to Ishida Ryuzo. At the same time, she lifted her finger and pointed at the ruins in front of them. She said in a serious tone, I sensed an unusual greater void and rushed over. But I didn't expect to be ambushed by him. Kurosaki Makoto smiled bitterly. Her tone was filled with unwillingness. If it wasn't for him, I would have stepped into heaven. Ishida Ryuzo did not listen to her. He continued to aim at Dustless and said, the Grim Reapers are all cunning. Don't be fooled by them. Also, after sorting out his thoughts, Ishida Ryuzo continued, the Grim Reapers are all, you have been talking for a long time. I have always wanted to ask you a question. Without waiting for Ishida Ryuzo to finish his sentence, Dustless cut him off and said coldly, your existence is unnecessary. There is no stage for you here. Leave now. I don't want to see your face. Dustless glanced at Ishida Ryuzo and said calmly, don't force my hand. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A sharp sound pierced through the air. Ishida Ryuzo raised his head and shot out all the photon arrows in his hand. The number of photon arrows was dense and vicious. In an instant, Dustless was destroyed. Hundreds of holes appeared on his body. It was a tragic sight. Your strength is average, but your mouth is quite good at bragging. Seeing this, Ishida Ryuzo snorted in disdain. He then took a step forward. However, before his foot could touch the ground, a bolt of lightning descended from the sky and suppressed Ishida Ryuzo. Boom boom boom. The ground shook and a circular crater appeared. Flashes of light gathered and condensed into Dustless's body. His indifferent eyes looked down at Ishida Ryuzo. Dustless's right foot stepped on his face mercilessly. I said before that I don't like to see your face. Since you don't know what's good for you, I can only melt this disgusting face. As soon as his voice fell, a large golden light swept out from Dustless's feet. The temperature was so high that even steel could be easily melted. Chapter 1059. Ishida Ryuzo was shocked. He felt the aura of death that he had never felt before. The high-density light did not even touch him, but he felt like he was going to melt like water. Ishida Ryuzo was sure that if he were to take Dustless's attack in his current state, he would definitely die. Don't touch him, he's one of us. Shinozaki Mako's beautiful eyes widened with anxiety. Although she was disgusted by the marriage arranged by the Ishida family, she couldn't just watch Ishida Ryuzo get killed. After all, she owed the Ishida family a debt of gratitude. One of us. Dustless turned to look at Shinozaki and sneered. He took the initiative to attack me with the Holy Annihilation Arrow. One of us attacking one of us? That's rare. Shinozaki Jinka was stunned when he heard this. He lowered his head silently in surprise. He knows the skill of Quincy. This time, it was Shinozaki's turn to be shocked. She looked at the shining leg that was approaching Ishida Ryuzo and quickly said, that's a misunderstanding, he's fine. Naive. Dustless glanced at Shinozaki indifferently and said, before coming to the modern world, the head captain said that if you encounter a Quincy sneak attack, there is no need to show mercy. Kill without mercy. This kid is the one who started it. Do you think I need to show mercy? Shinozaki, even if you don't understand the grudge between the Shinigami and Quincy, you should have heard of it. Ishin nodded. First of all, Shinigami and Quincy were hostile forces. Although he felt sorry for Shinozaki Makino, Ishida Ryuzo was the one who attacked first. He deserved to be killed. His hands were in Ishida Ryuzo's hands. No one forced him to do it. But Shinozaki's expression froze. She moved her lips but closed them again. She looked very helpless. You're going to suffer if you're so kind. Dustless's voice was unusually light. In short, there was more vitality in it. He said, besides, do you think this arrogant kid will appreciate it? The answer is no. Not only will he not, but he will also feel humiliated. For a man to be protected by a woman, this may be worse than killing him. Dustless's words were as sharp as a knife, piercing Ishida Ryuzo's self-esteem. His face, which could be considered handsome, suddenly became extremely distorted. I hate people like you the most. Others saved you, but you don't appreciate it. You even put on an expression of, I'm very capable and don't need you to meddle in other people's business. You're just a piece of trash. With a cold expression, Dustless's right leg landed on Ishida Ryuzo's face. Boom boom boom. A violent explosion resounded through the sky, and a wave of destructive force spread out. Steel was melted, buildings were erased, and even the invisible air was burned to the point of boiling. The temperature had increased by dozens of times. I underestimated you. I almost forgot, you are also a Quincy. The ground that Dustless and Ishida Ryukshin were standing on had been charred black, but Ishida Ryukshin had managed to escape the calamity. It's you who underestimated me. I'm a pure-blooded Quincy, don't underestimate me. In the smoke, Ishida Ryuzo's arrogant voice could be heard. Following that, he was covered in all sorts of unruly patterns, and his skin had become as hard as a meteorite. Blood tranquilizer? Luckily he's fine. Seeing this, Shinozaki Makoto heaved a sigh of relief. The rock that was hanging in front of his chest had also landed safely. Staring at Ishida Ryuzo's face, Shinozaki Makoto earnestly advised, Little Long, you should leave this place first. There's no need for you to get involved in this mess. You are the only child of the Ishida family. The smoke dispersed, revealing Ishida Ryuzo's face. Shinozaki Makoto was dumbfounded, and could not help but laugh out loud. This guy? I'm dying of laughter. Ishida Shiba also looked at Ishida Ryuzo's disfigured face, and laughed until he rolled on the ground. You bastard, I'll tear you into pieces and burn your bones to ashes. Seeing this, Ishida Ryuzo was stunned. He then used Erasure to condense a mirror, and looked at his face. His entire body turned red. There's no need to be so angry, right? At least I spared your life. Dustless shrugged helplessly. His eyes were filled with resentment, as if he was saying that Ishida Ryuzo should be thanking him. Looking closely, Ishida Ryuzo's handsome face was disfigured, and there was a huge footprint on it. It was like a branding iron, forever imprinted on Ishida Ryuzo's face. You should be thanking me. If you walk on the streets like this, I guarantee that you'll turn heads 100%. Dustless teased. His tone was filled with schadenfreude. He hated people like Ishida Ryuzo the most. Others were kind enough to save you, but you didn't appreciate it and insisted on keeping up appearances. If that was the case, then you should live a pitiful life. You bastard, you must have done it on purpose. Ishida Ryuzo glared at him, and his lungs were about to explode. A huge footprint almost covered his entire face. How was he going to face others in the future? You're right, I did it on purpose. But so what? Dustless said uninterestedly and yawned. With a sleepy expression, it was obvious that he did not put Ishida Ryuzo in his eyes. Aren't you the father of the second male lead? I'm going to hit you. If you're not happy, come and bite me. Chapter 1060. Ishida Ryukshin's entire body trembled and his face turned ashen. Killing someone was just a matter of nodding his head to the ground. What Wu Chun did was far worse than cutting him into 1,000 pieces. As a pure-blooded Quincy, Ishida Ryukshin thought highly of himself. Of course, it was undeniable that he had the capital to be superior. In this world, Quincy were very rare, and pure-blooded ones were even rarer. However, it was okay to be arrogant, but it depended on who the opponent was. To have a disdainful attitude towards someone who was stronger than you was courting death. If I just kill you, it would be too easy for you. I think it's more interesting to let you live in humiliation. Dustless ignored Ishida Ryukshin's eyes that wanted to peel his skin and break his bones. Boom boom boom. A violent hurricane swept from the distance, and the earth shook. Everyone felt like there was a mountain on their back, and they couldn't move an inch. Not only did he not die, he became stronger. What kind of monster did Sosuke Aizen create? Frowning, Dustless felt the surging waves of Ryatsu. He was very surprised, and he had a clearer understanding of Empyrean's strength. Then the sky turned dark red. A huge flash of light condensed above Empyrean's head, distorting space and time, like a whirlpool in the deep sea, swallowing the entire sky, and a red halo covered the sky. Gulp. Under this apocalyptic flash, everyone's expression changed greatly. Only Dustless could remain calm. Ishida Isshin and Ishida Ryukshin were seriously injured. They were already lucky that they didn't die from Dustless's sneak attack, and then they fought with Empyrean, and they were almost exhausted. As for Ishida Ryukshin, his handsome face was kicked by Dustless, and a domineering footprint was left on his face. "I must take revenge." Ishida Ryukshin touched his face and said while gritting his teeth. "Ao ao ao." At this time, a strange roar shook the sky, and it was even more terrifying than Empyrean. What are you doing? What are you doing? Get out of the way. Don't come near me." Suddenly, a panicked cry came. Dustless froze and subconsciously looked at Isshin. Shiba Isshin's mouth emitted a milky white spiritual pressure that covered his face like a mask. His spiritual pressure became different as he roared, which was similar to Subai's. This is voidification. This kid has been corroded by the power of the great illusionary realm. A glint of surprise flashed across Dustless's eyes as he exclaimed in shock. Only then did he remember that in the previous battle, Isshin Shiba was injured by Void, and 80% of Void's power had invaded his body. Damn it, how am I supposed to explain this to the head captain? Dustless had a headache. Before coming here, Old Man Yamamoto had told the two of them to take care of each other. Now that Isshin Shiba was inexplicably eroded by the power of the greater void, it was inevitable that he would be scolded. "Get out of my way!" Shinozaki Makino screamed in fear. Shiba Isshin was approaching her with saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth. "You bastard! Get away from Jinin!" Flying scythe kick. Ishida Ryukshin roared and channeled all the spiritual particles in his body towards Shiba Isshin. Shiba Isshin, who was completely consumed by the great illusionary realm, had an arrogant smile on his face as he opened his mouth and shot out a fiery red light. Boom boom boom. The destructive light easily blew away Ishida Ryukshin like a kite with a broken string. Bang bang bang. A few hundred meters away, Ishida Ryukshin was lying on the ground with his body charred. He was gasping for breath, and his heartbeat and breathing were very weak. It looked like he was about to stop. Monsters are gathering. Seeing this, Dustless sighed. Then, he turned into a photon and rushed towards Isshin at the speed of light. "Get out of my way!" Shinozaki Makino looked at Isshin in fear. Her soul was trembling as she was forced to a corner. Isshin was also approaching her with his teeth bared. Isshin was covered in milky white spiritual pressure. Under Shinozaki Makino's desperate gaze, he raised his sharp nails and stabbed towards her. "If you're dematerialized, even if you're my colleague, I can't let you go." "I'm sorry, Captain Isshin." Shinozaki Makino's hopeless eyes were filled with hope. Dustless stood in front of her with a sinister smile, and a thick beam of light condensed on his fingers. Laser! The flash of light poured out and hit Isshin Shiba without any accident. Boom boom boom. The moment the light touched Isshin, it exploded. The scorching heat engulfed him, and the milky white spiritual pressure on his skin was melted. God is kind to me. Why should I save you? I can use this opportunity to kill you. You bastard, you're a traitor. You flirted with Urahara Kisuke and Sifrim Kortsi. This is retribution. Dustless laughed. Since Isshin was already dematerialized, killing him would be an official matter. The head captain would not say anything. He could also use this opportunity to reap the rewards. Killing two birds with one stone. Pour all the dirty water on Isshin's head, make him the scapegoat, and kick him out of Soul Society. Roar, roar, roar. As if they had a tacit understanding, White Void also suddenly attacked from the side, opening his bloody mouth to bite at Yishiwen. The winner of this game has been decided. There's no need for you to exist. He turned his head and glanced at White Void. Suddenly, the space around him flashed with black light. It was tens of thousands of times sharper than a blade. Without exception, all of them were pointed at White Void. Dustless spat out a cold breath and ended White Void's life instantly. 90 Black Coffin of Hado. Poochie! 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 Countless rays of black light swarmed over, instantly crushing the body of ethereal White. Chapter 1061. Number 90's Hado cut through the void. His entire body was covered with scars, and his body was on the verge of collapsing. He was bleeding profusely, and the blood vessels in his body could not be stopped. Ow, ow, ow! All beasts were ferocious, and the void was no exception. He was originally a greater void, and was naturally easily angered. Being severely injured by Dustless did not suppress his bloodthirst. Instead, he was completely enraged. Roar! The heart-wrenching roar of anger spread, deafening everyone. Their brains were not listening to their commands, and the only thing they could think of was the void's roar. After all, it was created. The nature of the beast did not change. Dustless was unfazed by the roar that was filled with endless killing intent and hatred. The difference between them was too great, and there was no comparison at all. They were not even of the same origin. In Dustless's eyes, it was just the unhappiness of a child who was beaten to tears. Ka-ka-ka. The surrounding void shattered like a mirror, and there was a series of cracking sounds. The sky was swallowed by the red demonic light, and the places that were affected by the light were filled with dead silence. What kind of monster is this guy? He knows Void Flash, and he seems to know the Ghost Dao ability of the Grim Reaper. Shinozaki Makoto swallowed his saliva and said in disbelief. He was so shocked that his entire body was trembling slightly. Dustless turned his head and glanced at Shinozaki Makoto. Disappointment flashed through his eyes, and he sighed to himself. What a pity! Her body was also infiltrated by the void's power. She will die soon. Dustless sighed to himself. A pure-blooded Quincy was extremely rare, and there were not many of them in the world. Most of them were Habaku's lackeys. You are also a tragedy, Dustless suddenly said after a while. What do you mean? Shinozaki Makoto's expression changed slightly. He could sense that Dustless was implying something else. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, the void flash that Void White painstakingly created was completed. It turned into a void flash that was the size of a human's head, and the power it emitted was enough to destroy the world. What a terrifying void flash! Feeling the power of void flash, Shinozaki Mako said in fear. He instinctively shrunk his neck and stared at the giant void flash in the sky. Fear flashed in his beautiful eyes. In the end, she's still a woman. No, in the end, she's still just a student. Dustless calmly said as he stared at Shinozaki in her student uniform. It was normal for him to be afraid. After all, this was the first time he had met such an invincible Great Void Realm expert, and he even had the ability to control the Grim Reaper. Dustless focused his gaze on the expanding void flash. A murderous grin appeared on his face. In order for you to disappear without a trace, show me some of your true abilities. As soon as Dustless finished his words, a strange black sphere appeared behind him. It was the size of a fist and looked harmless. It was impossible for it to kill the enemy, but Shinozaki's body instinctively moved back. This, Shinozaki Makino was shocked as he stared at the mysterious bead in a daze. Suddenly, he realized that his body was no longer listening to him and instinctively wanted to avoid it. Just disappear forever. Dustless glanced at Void Flash coldly. Under his command, the truth-seeking ball floating behind him flew out. Roar! White Void also clearly sensed the black sphere, but he quickly gave it a look of disdain, even treating it as air. He did not feel any spiritual pressure fluctuations. It did not seem to have any destructive power, so he continued to focus on transferring spiritual pressure to Void Flash. Is it really going to work? Shinozaki Makino's face was filled with doubt. Under Void Flash's indifferent gaze, the truth-seeking ball came into contact with his body. Crack, 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 crack. Void Flash was as hard as a meteorite. Even number 90 Dao Breaker, Black Coffin, could not shatter it. His entire body started to collapse. The process was extremely strange. There were no wounds on his body, but he just disappeared mysteriously. His legs, abdomen, arms, head, all of them collapsed one by one. Roar? Void Flash roared unwillingly. His mouth full of sharp teeth spat out cold air as he stared at Dustless. Madness flashed in his eyes. Void Flash condensed on the horns on his forehead was thrown out with all of his strength. Even in death, you want to drag me down with you? This is very similar to Aizen's style. Staring at the incoming flash, Dustless was as calm as a breeze. The truth-seeking ball appeared behind him again. It was not proportional to the huge flash of light, but Kurosaki's face was full of relief. With the previous lesson, her heart also relaxed. As expected, the moment Void Flash came into contact with the truth-seeking ball, it collapsed on its own. The haze that shrouded the world also disappeared, and everything returned to normal. It's finally over. Seeing this, Shinozaki Makino breathed a sigh of relief. She immediately tried to stand up, but a black shadow covered her. Miss Shinozaki, you are also injured. Soon, you will be eroded by the power of the greater void and die. Dustless walked over and said lazily. Shiba Ishin was lying on the ground far away. The mask on her body was gradually collapsing. It was obvious that she was fighting against the power of the void in her body. I know. The power of the void is a fatal poison to the Quincy. Shinozaki Makino's beautiful eyes were dim. Her beautiful face was filled with loneliness as she said helplessly, I told you. No living creature wants to die. Dustless's lips curled into a faint smile. He continued, Miss Shinozaki, I can guarantee that you will be safe. Even if the power of the void destroys the dormitory, it will be fine. But we have to make a deal. Only then can I help you out of this crisis. Shinozaki Makino frowned. She looked at Dustless's eyes. After hesitating for a while, she said, Let's hear it. Chapter 1062. Shinozaki was curious about Dustless's true thoughts. She couldn't understand how a dying person like her could be of any use to Dustless. She might not even be of any use to him. Dustless closed his eyes and seemed to be thinking about something. His brows were tightly knitted. Am I of any value to you? Shinozaki asked curiously as she stared at Dustless's thoughtful face. She was just a dying person. She didn't think that she was of any value to be used or valued. Of course. Dustless grinned and revealed a mysterious smile. Even the most insignificant chess piece can explode with the most destructive power if used properly. Not to mention, you're very important. Shinozaki's face was blank. She didn't think that she was of much use. She was just a dying person. Do you know who your ancestor is? Dustless suddenly changed the topic and asked. Ancestor? Shinozaki made a distressed expression and bitterly smiled. I really don't know who the ancestor of the Shinozaki family is. Dustless shook his head and said directly, I'm talking about Yawach. Shinozaki thought for a long time before answering. Yawach? I think there was such a person. I heard that he was the ancestor of all Quincy, but I heard that he died many years ago. It's good that you know Yawach. Dustless wiped the sweat off his temples. He was afraid that Shinozaki was an ignorant person and had to start from the beginning. And then? Don't tell me that Yawach came back from the dead. Shinozaki blinked her gem-like eyes and said playfully. Why do you think he's dead? Dustless glanced at Yawach with a deep gaze and asked instead of answering. You have to understand that Yawach is the god of all Quincy. Even if he's immortal, god? He's not worthy. He's just a butcher. Dustless was planning to brag about Yuhabak and then scold him. Who would have thought that Shinozaki Manori would rudely interrupt him? Could it be? Thinking of a possibility, Dustless asked tentatively, was your ancestor killed by Yawach? Although it was just Dustless's guess, it was highly likely because the hometowns of Busby and Jugram were both conquered by Yawach and eliminated by Yawach. And such examples could be found everywhere. I'm not too sure about the specifics. All I know is that Yawach isn't a good person. The elders in my family once said that Quincy's decline was caused by Yoachi. It was all to satisfy his selfish desires, Shinozaki Makoto explained. His tone was filled with hatred. Idiot, that's because you Abyss Annihilation was too stupid. You drank Yoachi's blood and deserve to be killed. You will all become nourishment for the saints, in the future. Dustless complained in his mind. Those who wanted to quickly increase their strength would accept the gift of Yoachi, which was his own blood. Therefore, during the parting, it would be the nourishment for Yoachi to become stronger. In addition, the souls of those with impure blood would also belong to Yoachi after death. We've been talking for a long time. What do you want from me? Shinozaki Makoto reminded Dustless when he saw that Dustless was getting further and further away from the topic. Seeing that Shinozaki Makoto was angered by Yoachi, Dustless said, I'm sorry to tell you that Yoachi is not dead. It's just sealed. Other than that, the impure blood of Quincy is the nourishment for Yoachi's resurrection. You weren't one of them in the past. Now, your blood has been integrated with the power of the void, and your blood is no longer pure. This means that you are also one of the nourishments for Yoachi's resurrection. The biggest reason why Shinozaki Makoto would fall in the future was because of Yoachi. Impossible. How do you know all this? Shinozaki Makoto denied it immediately. Besides, I've never drunk Yoachi's blood. How can I be its nourishment? Dustless glanced at the flustered Shinozaki Makoto and said coldly, You haven't drunk Yoachi's blood, but what about your ancestor? Don't forget that Yoachi is the ancestor of all Quincy. Shinozaki Makoto was speechless. He wanted to refute, but he couldn't find a reason. What do you want? After a while, Shinozaki Makoto fixed his gaze on Dustless and said, If what you said is true, it's useless even if you save me. My blood is no longer pure. In the future, Yoachi will still take away my power. Your death is a foregone conclusion. There are some things that I can't change. Dustless looked at Shinozaki Makoto with a complicated expression. Although he was powerful, he wasn't omnipotent. He caught the unwillingness in Shinozaki Makoto's eyes and said, Are you willing to be killed by Yoachi? In fact, I can help you take revenge. Shinozaki Makoto was very doubtful. Really? Yoachi used to be the king of Quincy. Its strength must be shocking. Of course. Dustless smiled strangely and moved closer to Shinozaki Makoto. He said darkly, The so-called saint is actually just extracting your soul. I can implant something special in your soul in advance. I'll make that bastard Yoachi suffer so much that he'll wish he was dead. It'll be revenge for you. What do you think, Miss Shinozaki? Shinozaki Makoto was silent. Hesitation was evident in his eyes. Dustless wasn't surprised to see Shinozaki Makoto hesitate. He said, The great void in your body will soon devour your entire body. You'll die in a few hours. However, I can use my ability to help you suppress the great void and let you live for a few more years. In return, you have to let me implant a spell in your soul to give that bastard Yoachi a surprise. Chapter 1063. Shingo Kurosaki was instantly speechless. He didn't know what to say, but he felt that it was awesome. Previously, Wu Chen was still trying to talk to her and was very polite. Now that he suddenly called her an old bastard, she didn't come back to her senses for a moment. She had a feeling that she was in the clouds, as if everything that Wu Chen did before was just a disguise. What's your choice? Although you may die in the future, you will at least live for a few more years. Wu Chen asked. He was sure that Shinozaki Man Ori would agree. Although this woman was very gentle and her smile was as warm as the sun, there was another side to her personality. She was very strong, but she wouldn't compromise with the curse of fate. Even if she knew that it was a struggle before death, she would never give up. I promise you. Shinozaki replied resolutely. Her fragile appearance was replaced by strength. That's for the best. Dustless gently nodded. Just as he was about to pull Shinozaki away, the remaining restless spiritual pressure in the atmosphere strangely quieted down, and Dustless's footsteps also stopped. What a surprise, you actually suppressed the great void in your body. Dustless's gaze fell on Ishin as he nodded with a hint of appreciation in his tone. At the same time, he looked at Shinozaki beside him with a strange feeling in his heart. Because of Dustless's intervention, Shinozaki and Isshin were like strangers. Now, it seems that the probability of them becoming husband and wife in the future was reduced to 0. What were you talking about? Who is Yaoichi? Isshin, who had just woken up, asked. When he was fighting against the great void in his body, he faintly heard a lot of unknown information. Moreover, what the two said was reasonable, and it was obviously not nonsense. You heard it all? Dustless was stunned for a moment before he asked indifferently. His face was covered with frost. The Great Void's recovery ability is really amazing. Shinozaki has returned to normal in such a short time, and his body is intact. The original sword wound is also healed. Dustless secretly nodded, and the way he looked at Isshin changed. The hunter looked at his prey with sharp and threatening eyes. What do you plan to do? Coming closer to Dustless, Kurosaki Man-Ori spoke in a voice that only the two of them could hear. What if he leaks the news? Speaking up to hear, Shinozaki closed his mouth and waited for Dustless's reply. Hearing this, Dustless's lips curled into a faint smile. His expression was frivolous as he said, "Don't worry, there is a type of person in this world who will never speak. Only the dead would be speechless forever." Shinozaki Makoto was intelligent, so he naturally knew what Dustless was trying to do. However, he suddenly regretted it. Looking at Dustless's gloomy face, he felt as if he was asking a tiger for its skin. He felt that if Yaoichi was a jackal, the young man in front of him was a ferocious tiger. "Captain, what do you think about the modern world?" After a while, Dustless suddenly closed his eyes and asked. Hearing this, Isshin was stunned. He subconsciously looked around and said, "Although it's not as exquisite as Soul Society, it still has its own unique flavor. My first impression of it is pretty good." Wu Chen shook his head. The light on his right arm floated and condensed into a golden sword. He said coldly, "Captain Shiba, you misunderstood me. I mean, what will happen if the modern world becomes a graveyard?" Graveyard? Hearing this, Isshin was puzzled. He looked at Dustless and saw that his face was dark and murderous. In a trance, Isshin saw an unprecedented beast. It opened its bloody mouth and bared its fangs at him. "Captain Dustless, what do you mean?" Isshin, who felt that something was wrong, was secretly on guard. Looking at Dustless, who was emitting murderous aura, his right hand was already holding the hilt of his zanpakuto. "No wonder you were plotted against by Aizen Sosuke. Your brain is really slow." "Captain, I said this. I mean to destroy you, because you heard something you shouldn't have heard," Dustless said casually. Isshin's expression changed, and he immediately took the fiercest reaction. Bakudo number 61, Rokudo Light Prison. 6 huge golden light ribbons attacked from all directions, subduing the sloppy Dustless in an instant. Not only Wuchen, but Shinozaki Mako, who was beside him, also received the same treatment. He was restrained by 6 huge light ribbons and was unable to move. "Capture you and send you to Soul Society for the head captain to deal with," Isshin said sternly. However, as soon as his voice fell, a burst of fragmented sound made Isshin's expression stiff, completely replaced by astonishment. Wu Che just raised his foot and moved slightly, and the bakudo that bound him instantly disappeared. He calmly looked at Isshin. Bakudo number 61, Rokudo Light Prison. At the same time, 6 huge rays of light came from all directions, instantly blocking Isshin's escape route and binding him to the heavy armor. Kakaka, seeing this, Isshin's body swayed left and right, and after a while, he couldn't help but blush. He tried to destroy it in the same way as Dustless, but it was futile. The effect was negligible. "Pucci!" In desperation, Isshin could only use his sword to destroy the Rokudo Light Prison and break free from it. He looked around and hurriedly looked for Dustless, but he was surprised to find that Dustless was nowhere to be seen, and his Ryatsu was completely gone. "Pucci!" A cold light came from behind and penetrated Isshin's body. He suddenly turned around and saw Dustless. Of course, there was also the golden sword in his hand, which almost instantly injured Isshin, and the golden sword pierced his heart. "The gap between you and me is like the gap between Vasto Lord and Gilliam." Chapter 1064. Ishin looked at the golden sword in disbelief. Because of the high temperature, he felt an unprecedented stinging pain. His face suddenly became pale and extremely haggard. How is this possible? Did he come from the sky? Ishin was shocked. He couldn't figure out where Dustless came from. He looked around but couldn't find any trace. As expected of the captain, you are really talented. But unfortunately, you are my enemy, and you heard something you shouldn't have heard. Don't think that you will be safe, you will have to pay the price. Dustless chuckled. He jumped out using the heavenly hand, so Ishin couldn't understand it. Whoosh! A cold light swept across, piercing Dustless's eyes. He looked up and saw Ishin waving his Zanpakuto at Dustless in a very tricky way. Funny. Seeing this, Dustless didn't dodge. He raised his thin right arm and grabbed it. It seemed that he wanted to catch Ishin's attack with his bare hands. You are courting death. Seeing how arrogant Wuchen was, Ishin's murderous aura surged. His black pupils were filled with murderous aura, and his strength was several times stronger than before. Your hatred for me is quite deep. Dustless smiled. His right arm was still grabbing the Zanpakuto. Clang. A roar of steel resounded, and the head was not separated from the body as expected. The whole hand turned into 5 black fingers and easily caught the incoming Zanpakuto. You caught my Zanpakuto with your bare hands? Ishin exclaimed in disbelief while enduring the pain all over his body. It was as if he was in a dream. Everything that happened in front of him was illusory. As I said before, the gap between you and me is the gap between Vasto Lord and Killian. It was just a boring one-sided crush. Do you think you can be on par with me? Don't joke around. We're not 2 or 3 years old kids. Don't have such unrealistic thoughts in the future. The chakra in his body surged, and his eyes rapidly twisted. Ripples gushed out from his purple eyes, easily forcing Ishin to retreat. Shinra Tensei. The repulsive force easily sent Shiba Ishin flying, forcing him to retreat again and again, cutting a sorry figure. So, Dustless took a step forward and appeared next to Ishin Shiba in an instant. He chased after him and attacked him. The Kusanagi sword in his hand shone brightly. Clang, clang, clang. The sparks from the clash of swords and sabers were particularly dazzling, and the frequency was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the two had clashed dozens of times, but the situation was almost one-sided. Ishin was forced back by Dustless, and the wounds on his body were getting more and more, and he was bleeding non-stop. Puchi. Dustless aimed his Kusanagi sword at Shiba Ishin's right shoulder. Shiba Ishin's right arm was cut open, and his right arm that was holding the Zanpakuto trembled. His Zanpakuto almost fell to the ground. Light speed kick. Taking advantage of this, a straight flash of light whizzed out. The momentum was fierce, and it was like a golden spear that was unstoppable. Ishin wanted to dodge, but at this moment, he was already covered in wounds. Although they weren't fatal, the number of wounds greatly limited his speed. He was inevitably hit by the flash of light. Boom, boom, boom. The earth trembled, and Ishin, who was covered in black smoke, was sent flying. His body was severely burned, and his face was unrecognizable. Is this the end? Glancing at Ishin, Dustless said uninterestedly. When he was about to finish him off with his Zanpakuto, Ishin stood up again. Shinozaki Ichigo in the future must be inherited. Seeing this scene, Dustless was interested again. He was about to test how long Ishin could last, but his body strangely emitted a black mist. The spiritual pressure disappeared? What's going on? Dustless was surprised, and he suddenly realized that he couldn't feel Ishin's spiritual pressure. It was as if it suddenly disappeared into thin air, and he couldn't detect it at all. No wonder he woke up and was willing to come back to the shore. Dustless guessed and immediately shook his head. Ishin was a stubborn person, and it was impossible for him to give up, so there was only one possibility. He had evolved to a higher dimension than Dustless. Could it be Moonless? Although it was just Wu Chen's personal guess, he said with certainty, "That's right." So far, there were only 2 people who had truly released Moonless. One was Shinozaki Ichigo, and the other was his father, Ishin. Get out of the way, Something is wrong with this guy. She was counting on Dustless to save her life. If Dustless died first, she would die with him. And Ishin Shiba in front of him was obviously not right. There was a mysterious black mist floating around his body, and so was his Zanpakuto. Especially his deep eyes, they were dead silent, as if they could see through people's hearts, full of oppression. "This is my strongest move," Ishin said with a hoarse voice. "After using this move, I will completely lose the power of the Shinigami, and it is also my last move to end you." Hearing this, Dustless looked at Ishin sadly and said lazily, "It is indeed a very strong move, but it can only end you, it can't end me. It's also impossible, you're just asking for it, Captain." Dustless looked at Ishin calmly. "It's just moonless, there's no need to worry." Chapter 1065. Ishin Shiba's Zanpakuto was nowhere to be seen. The blade in his hand was completely made up of mysterious black mist. There was no blade, no cut, and no pressure. Everything looked normal at first glance. Other than the fact that he couldn't sense Shinozaki Ishin's Ryatsu, everything else was normal. Only Dustless felt the threat of death. "Bring it on, Ishin Shiba." Dustless wasn't surprised that Ishin Shiba knew how to use Moonless. After all, he was the one who taught Shinozaki Ichigo how to use Moonless. It was only natural that Moonless would be used as well. This father and son had many similar techniques. Although the state in front of him was similar to Moonless, there was a fundamental difference. They were two different techniques, but they were similar to Shinozaki Ichigo's Moonless. Dustless cleaned the dust on his clothes and said helplessly, "So strong. My clothes are stained with so much dust. Is this guy not afraid of death? He can still remain calm in the face of such a powerful and dangerous technique, and he's even provoking that Shinigami called Ishin Shiba." He was completely different from Dustless. Shinozaki, who was watching in the dark, cursed Ishin Shiba for seeking death. Ishin Shiba didn't make any excessive moves. However, his face was covered in frost, and the invisible blade in his hand grew larger and larger. "Go to hell and repent." As soon as his voice fell, Ishin raised his black blade and swept out. A huge chop was like a hot knife through butter. The ground was easily torn apart like a piece of paper. The black light that wanted to destroy everything could condense time and space. The world was solemn, and only the crisp sound of cracking could be heard. The earth was completely destroyed by Moonless. The only thing that could be heard was the sound of destruction. I thought it would be a powerful technique. I was looking forward to it, but it's just this. Glancing at the incoming black light, Wu Chen regained his composure. He waved his big hand, and a dazzling brilliance swept out from the void behind him. A strange spiral weapon emerged from it. The moment the strange sword appeared, it emitted a demonic red light that quickly deciphered the structure of the entire world. "What is that?" Ishin Shiba and Makoto Kurosaki's attention was attracted by the aura of the ancient Desolation era. Their expressions changed, especially when Ishin instinctively retreated. When he regained his senses, he was shocked, and his mind was in a mess. How evil! Shinozaki Manori was also mentally prepared. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. As far as she knew, voidness was the most evil thing in the world. However, compared to that strange spiral sword, the so-called voidness was not even worth mentioning. It's normal to feel fear. After all, this thing can sever the entire world. Dustless said softly as he gripped the Gwaili sword. With a gentle flick of his thumb, the Gwaili sword spun at high speed as if it was turning its head. A dark red hurricane of destruction swept out. The red hurricane descended upon the world. From an insignificant small tornado, it instantly expanded thousands of times. If not for Dustless deliberately suppressing it, Kongzucho would have collapsed in the blink of an eye. The red hurricane was extremely terrifying. The moment it appeared, it tore apart the void. The originally clear day dimmed, and it was as if they had arrived at the depths of the dark and cold universe. Ishin Shiba's moonless sword, which he had used all his strength to cast, was destroyed by the hurricane. The destroyed void was extremely horrifying. The ghastly cracks were enough to send chills down one's spine. Every time it was repaired, it would be shattered by the remnant energy of the good separation sword. The cycle continued until the remnant energy of the good separation sword was completely destroyed. Dustless looked at Ishin Shiba, but he was surprised to find that the kid had disappeared. Oh f***y, I was careless. Dustless suddenly slapped his head and cursed, that kid is really smart. He's as cunning as a rabbit. Kurosaki did not know whether to laugh or cry. He looked deeply at Dustless and said bluntly, you can't even lie to a 3-year-old child. You must have let him go on purpose. You're helping your enemy. Dustless did not deny it. He admitted, so what if I help my enemy? If he really has the ability to kill me in the future, I will thank God. Dustless touched the Hogyoku on his chest and looked helpless. If it was in the past, he would definitely kill the dangerous enemy in advance. However, the evolution of the Hogyoku was too strange. Dustless had to be afraid of death in order to evolve to a higher realm. What kind of person could make Dustless feel afraid? Of course, it was someone stronger than him. It would be best if Ishin Shiba could surpass Dustless's level in the future. Let's go. It's time to experiment on you. The sky was dark. In a foreign world, there was no end to it. It was dead and there was no one around. At this moment, the void distorted and a large whirlpool appeared. 2 figures stepped out of it. This is my God's might space. It's in another dimension, so no one will disturb us. Don't worry. Wuchen explained when he saw Shinozaki Manori looking around suspiciously. All right, take off your clothes. Wuchen glanced at Shinozaki Manori and said indifferently, Take off my clothes? Kurosaki's expression froze. She hesitated and was obviously embarrassed. Kurosaki looked at Dustless from the corner of her eyes. She saw that his eyes were as clear as water. There was not a trace of lust in them. Kurosaki gritted her teeth and nodded. However, Dustless's next sentence made her suspicious. Hurry up and take it off. I promise I won't peek at you. Wuchen said impatiently as he felt helpless towards Shinozaki's hesitation. Kurosaki's face was full of doubts. Just as she was about to ask, the strange spiritual pressure in her body went berserk. Her expression changed and she undressed without hesitation. Chapter 1066. Shinozaki Minori's skin was as white as snow. It was smooth and smooth. It was as if there were no impurities in it. Shinozaki Makoto's figure was also extremely hot. She had a voluptuous figure with a curvy front and back. She had a lot of curves in the right places and a lot of curves in the right places. However, Dustless did not have the time to appreciate such a soul-stirring scene. It's a miracle that you can still retain your consciousness even with this thing. I give you full marks for your desire for life. There was a hole in Shinozaki Makoto's chest. It was slightly smaller than a fist and it penetrated her entire body. Shinozaki Makoto's sweat dripped down like raindrops. You still have time to be sarcastic. Heal me. I can't hold on for long. Shinozaki Makoto reminded when she saw that Dustless was not doing anything. Don't worry, I won't let you die so quickly. There are some things that I need to promise you. Inside the dead silent space of Shunwei, Wuchen took out a blade of grass from nowhere and held it in his mouth frivolously. He was so relaxed and comfortable that he sat on the ground with his buttocks and remained motionless. Don't you feel pain when you talk while sitting? Shinozaki Makoto was furious and glared at Dustless. She could feel that something was wrong in her body. The power of the great void was gradually eating away at her spiritual pressure. Her mind was in a trance and sometimes it was good and sometimes it was bad. The roar of the great void came out of her mouth. It's actually very easy to suppress the great void in your body. You just need to. Looking at Shinozaki Makoto who was in pain, Dustless knew that it was not the time to drag it on. He said, you just need to inject a power that is completely opposite to the great void. In other words, the power of the Grim Reaper will suppress the great void's spiritual pressure and you will not become void. However, your pure blood that belongs to Quincy will be contaminated. Dustless stopped and waited for Shinozaki Makoto's decision. Just do it, there's no problem. Shinozaki Makoto's tone was firm. That's good. Seeing this, Dustless nodded slightly and immediately sneered, I will inject my own spiritual pressure and soul into your body, but there will be something special in it that will seal a certain technique. But there is no need to worry, it will not affect your normal life. Shinozaki Makoto pouted with obvious dissatisfaction. Regardless of whether the Kage affected his daily life or not, no one would want to have something inexplicable placed in his body. Forget it, let's hurry up and get ready. The cheerful Shinozaki Makoto smiled and said with a relieved tone. Dustless didn't waste any time. He quickly got up and walked to Kurosaki Mako's side. He injected his spiritual pressure and soul into her body to suppress the void. With Dustless's help, Shinozaki Jindo was safe and sound in the end, and he successfully implanted the transcription seal in Shinozaki Jindo's body. With Dustless's current strength, he could place the transcription seal into anyone's body at will, but its power would be greatly reduced. Therefore, he placed it into the soul and spiritual pressure that he had implanted in Shinozaki Mako. Once Yawachi used this saint ability to forcibly extract Shinozaki Jindo's power, it meant that Dustless's power would be devoured by Yawachi. The Amaterasu, sealed in the transcription seal, would burn. Amaterasu was the most effective against a person's soul. Time passed, and 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Shinozaki Jindo left safely, and Dustless naturally returned to Soul Society. Soul Society held the same captain's meeting as usual. Is this true? Inside a team house, Yamamoto frowned as he listened to Dustless's report. Yes, head captain. Dustless's expression was serious as he answered. The situation had been exaggerated by him, and the gist of it was that Shiba Ishin was severely injured and was unfortunately killed by Void White. As for Wuchen, he went through untold hardships to kill White Void and take revenge for Shiba Ishin. Captain Dustless's captain on a mission is always in trouble. Ikamaru Jin chuckled, and his tone was obviously criticizing. That's why, Captain Ikamaru Jin, don't ever meet me. Otherwise, the next unlucky one may be you. Dustless naturally didn't want to be outdone and immediately retorted. It's considered a perfect mission, but it's a pity that we lost Captain Shiba. Head Captain Yamamoto was so upset that he wanted to vomit blood. In Soul Society, there were always captains who were killed or died from other unnatural causes. Not bringing back that void is a serious crime. Mayuri said unhappily. His 12th Division put in a lot of effort to capture Void White, but in the end, they didn't even get a single strand of hair. Losing the wife and losing the soldiers. The collection of souls is almost done, and the other Hogyoku is almost complete. It won't be long before we start. Aizen sneered as he glanced at Dustless. Aizen Sosuke had an unforgettable hatred for Dustless. Ever since Dustless appeared, Aizen Sosuke felt like there was a giant wall in front of him, making him extremely difficult to deal with. Once there was a suitable opportunity, Aizen would never let Dustless go. When the new Hogyoku is completed, it's time for you to die. Aizen closed his eyes and began to think of a plan to use Kyoka Suigetsu to deal with Dustless through Central 46 to deal with Dustless. He knew that Urahara Kisuke's half Hogyoku was still in Dustless's hands, and it was impossible for him to hand it over. He could only order the entire Soul Society to deal with Dustless. Chapter 1067. After another hour, the captain's meeting finally came to an end. Every time they talked about something trivial, but Old Man Yamamoto was very happy about it. Every time they had a meeting, except for his sickly disciple, Jushiro Yukitake, everyone else had to be present. No one was allowed to escape. Long time no see, Shinkon. After the captain's meeting, all the captains left one after another. Unohana Retsu came up to greet him with a smile, but soon after, her face wrinkled with dissatisfaction as she said unhappily, Shinkon seems to have been avoiding me recently. Hearing this, Dustless bitterly smiled and decisively said, Retsu, that's just your imagination. Recently, I've been busy with work. You know that I rarely have time to rest. Almost every day I have a lot of work to do. I haven't had the chance to relax recently. Dustless quickened his pace, wanting to escape. He was indeed purposely avoiding Unohana Retsu. This woman's nose was just too sensitive, and the word, smart, was not enough to describe her. Chun-kun, Unohana Retsu dragged out her words with a complicated expression. This, looking at Unohana Retsu's sorrowful face, Dustless was speechless. He suddenly realized that he was a bit cruel. When he first came to Soul Society, it was always Unohana Retsu who helped him. Now, he was avoiding Unohana Retsu for no reason, just because she was too smart. It was indeed a bit unreasonable. Retsu, you're thinking too much. I suffered quite a bit of injuries when dealing with a great void in the modern world. I was just about to go to the 4th division to ask for your help. Dustless changed his tone and said with a smile. Unohana Retsu nodded and led the way. Is that void very strange? It can actually injure you? Unohana Retsu asked in surprise. She knew Dustless's strength very well. Looking at the distant horizon, Dustless did not think much of it. Of course, he was just making things up to fool Unohana Retsu. Although void was very strong, it was impossible for it to injure him. He immediately replied, yes, he is very strong. He even knows the death god's ghost Tao. He is worlds apart from the great void realm that I know of. It took me a lot of effort to get rid of him. Unohua Lai did not doubt Dustless's words at all. That day, the 12th Division had indeed detected a large amount of spiritual pressure in the modern world. Looking at Unohua Lai's face, Dustless suddenly felt sorry for her. He had only made up a story, but Unohua Lai had actually believed it without a doubt. Dustless was touched, but at the same time, he felt guilty. Lai. Dustless turned to look at Unohua Lai's gentle face and said seriously, if I betray Soul Society one day, which side will you choose to side with? Unohua Lai was stunned upon hearing this. She stared at Dustless's face and felt troubled. This choice is truly vexing. After a while, Unohua sighed helplessly. She had been loyal to Soul Society for 1,000 years, so Unohua Lai could not easily abandon her beliefs. On the other hand, Dustless could barely be considered a close friend, so she could not easily give up her beliefs. There's no need to feel troubled, Lai. Seeing this, Dustless was somewhat disappointed. This was within his expectations. After all, he had only known Unohua Lai for a little more than a year. 1,000 years versus a short 1 year, it was clear which was more important. If you betray Soul Society, I will definitely side with you and destroy Soul Society. After a while, Dustless suddenly said. His eyes were filled with determination, and his clear eyes were as firm as a boulder. In Dustless's heart, Soul Society and Unohua Lai's feelings were not proportional. If he had to choose between the two, he would definitely side with Unohua Lai without hesitation. Unohua Lai's heart that had been sealed for 1,000 years loosened, and a warm current flowed through her heart. After 1,000 years, she, who had observed people to the smallest detail, could naturally tell that Dustless's words were from the bottom of his heart. His sincerity was without any pretense. No matter how young you are, you're still an adult. If the head captain hears this, he'll make a big fuss. Unohua Lai did not know whether to laugh or cry, but she was very touched. Oh right, Shinjun, the 4th Division has a lot of injured people from a few days ago. They're still waiting for me to take care of them. I'll take my leave first. Dustless nodded and said, do as you wish. As expected, she still can't let go of Soul Society. Looking at Unohua Lai's disappearing figure with a complicated expression, Dustless felt a sense of loss. At the same time, he laughed at himself. According to his previous temperament, he would not hesitate to ruthlessly destroy such an untactful woman. However, for some reason, he did not have such extreme emotions when facing Unohua Lai. He only wanted to respect her choice and did not have any other thoughts. The sky gradually darkened. At night, the sky was filled with stars. The moonlight was like a plate, and the starlight that filled the sky was extremely beautiful. Captain, I have something to do, I need to take leave. Matsumoto Ranju had an I'm very busy expression, as if something big had really happened. However, Dustless ignored her. Her so-called matter was actually going to drink. Forget it, go. Remember to come back quickly. Waving his hand, Dustless gestured for Matsumoto Ranju to scram. Since he had nothing to do recently, let her do as she pleased. Dustless did not restrict the movements of these team members. Matsumoto Ranjiku suddenly smiled and disappeared in front of Dustless like a storm. This is unfinished work? Looking at the documents on the table in front of him, Dustless muttered to himself. Out of boredom, he picked up the documents and carefully read them. After a while, his expression became incomparably serious. Strange, this can't be an accident. There must be a problem. Dustless said sternly after reading a few times and confirming that his eyes were not blurred. Chapter 1068. Staring at the information, Dustless was deeply puzzled. This was too strange. Captain, is there something wrong? Rukia looked at the intoxicated Dustless and asked. Her captain was rarely as serious as he was today. Where did you get this information? Wuchen, who came back to his senses, asked instead of answering. His tone was full of suspicion. This, Xiao Mu and Lu Chia came over, and a burst of seductive fragrance also came over, causing Wu Chen's heart to become restless. It seems that Captain Nye sent it a few days ago. At that time, the captain was rushing to the modern world for a mission, so he left it here and didn't see it until now. Tilting her head, Rukia explained. That means no one knows. Hearing this, Dustless's mind moved. The content of the information was very simple, just a few words. The 12th Division detected a high-density Ryatsu explosion in Central Room 46. Those so-called sages were weak, so it was impossible for them to have a Ryatsu explosion, and they seemed to have died long ago. But Sosuke Aizen's laboratory seemed to be under Central Room 46. Maybe another Hogyoku was successfully created, causing a Ryatsu explosion. Although it was just a guess, Dustless was very sure that it was the birth of another Hogyoku. When he fused two Hogyoku, a similar large-scale Ryatsu explosion occurred, very similar to what Nekomori said. He actually created another Hogyoku so quickly. Dustless was surprised. Although Aizen had his own research materials, it was unimaginable that he could create a Hogyoku in such a short time. It would only take a little more than a month at most. Creating a Hogyoku requires a lot of souls. Where did he get them? Dustless frowned and was very puzzled. Recently, there were no signs of souls disappearing. Even if there were, it was done by Subai a while ago. After being destroyed by Dustless, it was rare for souls to disappear. The amount of souls needed to create a Hogyoku was even more massive. No matter what tricks you have up your sleeves, it will all be futile in the end. Thinking about Sosuke Aizen's current strength, Dustless felt relieved. Although he had the strength of a super captain, it wasn't enough to make a difference. Let nature take its course. After a while, Dustless heaved a heavy sigh of relief. He suddenly realized that he was paying too much attention to Sosuke Aizen. In the end, Sosuke Aizen was just a small character. There was no need to care too much about his actions. In the dark laboratory, the previous Ise-sensei was suppressed, so only Jin and Sosuke Aizen were left. Creak. The iron door was pushed open, revealing Sosuke Aizen's figure. At this moment, he had a smile on his face and his tone was very happy. His steps were vigorous, he seemed to be in a good mood. In his hand was a blue bead that was almost identical to Dustless's Hogyoku. Jin, how's the news from our allies? They seem to be impatient. I don't know what Dustless did to provoke them. But this is good. We are weak compared to Captain Dustless. Although our allies are dangerous, we have the same goal. Plus, they helped me complete the Hogyoku. Aizen's tone was sincere, but it didn't take long before his tone turned cold. But if they want to use us, they're dreaming. I have received the exact news. Aizen played with the Hogyoku in his hand and said coldly. Fusing with Urahara Kisuke's Hogyoku can make up for this Hogyoku, so I have decided to attack Captain Dustless soon. Join forces with that group of Quincy? Ikamaru Jin asked. His tone was filled with fear. Not long ago, Quincy and Sosuke Aizen secretly contacted each other. Ikamaru Jin thought Aizen would directly refuse, but he accepted Jugram's proposal. He was willing to deal with Dustless together. As proof of their friendship, Jugram took out a large number of souls for Aizen to complete the Hogyoku quickly. Of course not. They are just rats hiding in the shadows. The key is to rely on us. So Suke, Aizen said. Ikemer Jin scoffed at Quincy and sneered, 8,000 years ago, they left the stage of history, and now they're back with a vengeance. I don't know what relationship Captain Dustless has with Quincy. That's not important. So Suke Aizen smiled mysteriously. Joining forces with me is just to kill with a borrowed knife. But that Jugram guy is too arrogant. After dealing with Captain Wuchen, I'll tell Head Captain Yamamoto about Quincy's whereabouts. What kind of interesting things will happen then? It's really exciting. Ikemaru Jin nodded. He agreed with Aizen's plan. Using Quincy's power to complete the Hogyoku and mobilizing the entire Soul Society to deal with Dustless. Then he will tell Yamamoto about Quincy's hidden Wandenrake. Killing several birds with one stone. Dustless didn't know what Aizen was thinking. At this moment, he was enjoying Unohana's treatment in the 4th division. Inside the misty hot spring, Wu Chen was lying in it, swimming around in satisfaction. This was a special hot spring created by Unohana. It was the same as last time. It could be used to heal injuries. Dustless was using it as a place to have fun. Chapter 1069. Only Dustless and Unohana were in the sealed room. With the experience of the hot spring last time, Dustless was much calmer this time. He even ignored Unohana and swam around like a child. Chin Jun's body's recovery is really amazing. Looking closely at Dustless's smooth skin, it was white and tender, without any blemishes. It was so smooth that even Unohana found it dazzling when she looked at it through the reflection of the light. Unohana could not help but feel incredulous. She subconsciously touched her own skin and felt a sense of defeat. She was shocked to find that her skin was not as good as Dustless. Half an hour ago, she had bandaged Dustless's skin and it was as smooth as white jade. This brat. Unohana shook her head and felt conflicted. She never thought that she would lose to someone because of this, especially when the opponent was a man. Chin-jun, aren't you worried? Seeing Dustless enjoying himself like a little fish, Unohana cautiously reminded him. Even if the sky falls, the captain will hold it up. There is no need for people like us to worry. Dustless swam around Unohana. The two of them only covered each other's private parts. He handed a towel to Unohana and suddenly stopped in front of her. You really know how to enjoy yourself. Unohana looked at Dustless, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She took the towel and began to gently wipe Dustless's back like last time. This feels so good. Swaying his body, Dustless was so happy that he almost fell into Unohana's arms. Dustless believed that he was the first person in Soul Society who could make Unohana take the initiative to wipe his back. Chin-jun. After a while, Unohana whispered into Dustless's ears. She then quietly wiped Dustless's back and did not say anything else. What is it like? Dustless slightly opened his eyes and calmly asked. He felt that something was wrong with Unohana today. She was the complete opposite of her usual self. She seemed to have a lot on her mind. Are you planning to betray Soul Society in the future? Unohana's words caused Wu Chen's eyes to instantly open. Blood vessels appeared in his eyes. He abruptly turned his head and stared at her extremely complicated face. Wu Chen's expression quickly changed, and his emotions became very varied. If it was someone else who asked him this question, his throat would have been slit. Lie. Do you want to hear me tell you the truth or a lie? His pupils emitted a cold light. Wu Chen felt that some things had to be made clear. It was not a good idea to drag it on. Of course, the truth. Unohana said, rolled her eyes. No one wanted to hear lies. Wu Chen nodded and immediately said bluntly, I did intend to betray Soul Society and even wanted to destroy it. The system of this world is too rotten. Of course, I also have my own selfish desire to devour the Spirit King. Are you crazy? Unohana's eyes widened. For the first time, she felt that the usually wise Dustless had lost his mind. Crazy? You're right to think so. In your eyes, Spirit King is a living person with flesh and blood. How can you devour it? In reality, that is not the case. Dustless walked behind Unohua Lai with a smile and began to rub her back. His technique was very experienced. Occasionally, he would deliberately take advantage of her. Perhaps because Dustless's words were too shocking, the absent-minded Unohua Lai did not notice. The essence of the Spirit King's existence is to stabilize the three realms, which is the stability of the main realm, Hueco Mundo, and Soul Society's souls entering and leaving. As for the person who created the Spirit King, it was actually Soul Society. The so-called Spirit King was created by Soul Society. Without hiding anything, Chen said something shocking. We, a group of death gods, are willing to obey a created lie. But don't you think it's very funny? Maybe you don't know, but 1,000 years ago, that Yaowachi you fought was very likely a part of Spirit King's body. Who told you all this? It's very likely that someone made it up to deceive you. Unohua Lai took a deep breath and questioned. Hearing this, Dustless slightly raised his eyebrows. Then he whispered into Unohua Lai's ear, extracting other people's memories is one of my abilities. I once extracted the memories of Yaowachi's subordinates. I can guarantee that all of this is real. Dustless said half-heartedly. He could not say that he had transmigrated. Unohua Lai stared at Dustless's face. After a while, she suddenly sighed. You should understand, I know that you're the First Sword 8. I also know that you've followed Yamamoto for 1,000 years. I also know that you have a deep relationship with Squad Zero. However, telling you all of this, Lai, you should understand what I mean. Unohua Lai bitterly smiled. She naturally understood what Dustless meant. In reality, he was forcing her to make a choice. She could either side with Dustless or fight with Dustless right now. I'll tell you all of this as well as my plan. I just want to say that I'm sincere towards you. I don't have any other motives. Wu Chen said indifferently. He then tried to pull Unohua into his arms. At first, she reacted violently, but in the end she seemed to have given up and let him do as he pleased. She even leaned on Wu Chen's shoulder tiredly with a worried expression. There's a chance. Dustless chuckled inwardly. Forcing the other party to compromise was the same as undressing Junquan. Although they were both pleasurable, pots, pa. Being able to charm the other party was clearly more challenging and gave him a greater sense of accomplishment. This would save the girls in the system from calling Dustless an unreasonable bandit every day. Chapter 1070. Seeing Unohua Lai lying in his arms, Dustless immediately displayed his strongest ability apart from fighting. His hands began to move up and down Unohua Lai's body, teasing her sealed and pure heart. He would always touch a certain sensitive spot, causing Unohua Lai's body to gradually heat up. At the same time, his mouth did not stop, occasionally blowing hot air into Unohua Lai's ears. In just a few minutes, Unohua Lai began to pant heavily and her eyes became blurry. Hurry up and stop. After a while, Unohua Lai, who could not take it anymore, began to violently twist her body. In just a short while, Dustless was already messing with her, causing her mind to tremble. Unohua Lai even suspected that in another half an hour, her IQ would drop to negative levels. You're not old, but you're an expert in this area. Unohua Lai rolled her eyes at Dustless and pouted. Hee, there's no harm in having more skills. In this day and age, it's important to develop in all areas. Dustless laughed embarrassedly and teased Unohua Lai. At the same time, he was overjoyed. After so many years, he was no longer the ignorant brat from before. Naturally, he knew the principle of adapting to changes. He immediately put on a loyal expression and promised solemnly, Lai, you've helped me for so many years, and I will never forget your kindness. I only have one heart that has never changed, a heart that only weighs 200 grams. The only place left in my heart is you. After saying that, if not for Unohua Lai's existence, Dustless would have given himself a slap. Unohua Lai had only taken care of him for a year. As for many years, that was complete nonsense. Once the inspiration came, stopping was as hard as ascending to the heavens. Fortunately, Unohua Lai did not care about this. She softly pondered, I'm not interested in what you said before. I just want to know what you think of the future of Soul Society. Do you plan to eliminate all of the death gods? Hearing this, Dustless resolutely shook his head. He had never thought of such a ridiculous idea before. My goal is to devour the Soul Kings, or rather, replace them. Those death gods can't give me any benefits, and killing them will take a lot of time. It's not worth it, and there's no value. Without even thinking about it, Dustless directly spoke the truest thoughts in his heart. Is that so? That's for the best. Unohualai let out a sigh of relief. Her tense nerves also visibly relaxed. She had a special relationship with Soul Society, and countless people who were familiar with her. Naturally, she did not want them all to be killed by Dustless. At that moment, his thoughts of resisting Dustless were greatly reduced. By the way, why do you know so, from the first generation from the sword? Dustless. From Dustless, lies from lies, ants, lies, lie, the number from the hand and hand, from the soul from God. Because back then, Quincy was not destroyed. Without hiding anything, Dustless directly said, his subordinate, you might know Jugram, is the one who led Quincy to continue to struggle at death's door, silently waiting for the day Yawach awakens. That man didn't die? Unohualai's mind went blank, and she asked in shock. Of course, he's the god of Quincy. How could he be killed so easily? Back then, he was only defeated by the captain, who sealed him in the end. Dustless softly explained, ignoring the shocked Unohualai, and continued, not only did he not die, but Yawach also had the same goal as me, devouring the Soul King. Soul King? What's so special about him? It's not like he's a spiritual pressure that you can eat as you please. Unohualai felt a headache coming on. Soul Society's guards were absolutely loyal, but when it came to Dustless and Yawach, they were treated like food, and anyone could take a bite out of them. I told you before that the so-called Soul King was actually created by Soul Society to stabilize the entry and exit of souls. In other words, it's an amalgamation of souls. Devouring it means that one's soul will explosively increase, so it's naturally a target for tigers and wolves. Dustless lightly smiled as he explained, his tone carrying a hint of passion. If Naruto was a place where one fought for chakra, then Shinigami was a place where one fought for souls. The strength of one's soul determined the strength of one's spiritual pressure. Gulp. Unohualai choked, clearly tempted. She naturally understood the importance of souls to Shinigami. Not just Shinigami, even voids had a huge effect, and the benefits were unimaginable. If that's the case, then why hasn't anyone tried to take the Soul King? If it's really as golden as you say, then it should attract the attention of all creatures. Unohualai continued to ask. It wasn't that she doubted Dustless's words, but that it was simply too shocking and beyond anyone's expectations. It's not that they don't want to devour it, but there's a huge drawback to devouring the Soul King, and it's very likely that it will harm them. After the Soul King collapses, the three realms, Hueco Mundo, Soul Society, and the modern world, will all collapse. Now do you understand the use of the Soul King? What's your choice, Lai? Dustless expectantly asked, his face full of hope. You also want to devour the Soul King? Unohualai frowned. After the Soul King disappeared, it would mean that the entire world would turn into ashes, and the consequences would be unimaginable. At that time, all living things might disappear. Hueco Mundo, the modern world, and Soul Society would all disappear, becoming history. I'm not Yoch. He indeed wants to devour the Soul King after killing it. Although I also want to kill the Soul King, the meaning is different. In other words, I only want to replace it and become the new Soul King, dominating the entire world. Chapter 1071. Unohana stared straight into Dustless's eyes. She could tell that it was not a lie, and she could clearly feel Dustless's heartbeat. I'm going to reject your offer. Are you going to kill me now? Unohualai changed the topic and spoke in a different tone. Silence me. Dustless shook his head resolutely. Even if Unohana went to the head captain, he would not be afraid. That's not important. Even if head captain Yamamoto knew that I would betray him, he would not be able to stop me. The decision has always been in my hands. Soul Society has no right to choose. Wu Chen spoke frankly and confidently, filled with deep confidence. Moreover, Ray, you seem to have forgotten something. No matter what, Soul Society is the unlucky one. Even if I let them go, don't forget that Yawach is still there. Eradicating all the Grim Reapers and washing away the shame of the past is his long-cherished wish. His casual words caused Unohua Lai's heart to fall to the bottom. That's about it. Dustless's mind raced. He knew that as long as he could break Unohana's last line of defense, he would get what he wanted. He continued to pressure her. According to my observations, Wandless Empire is far stronger than the Grim Reapers. Although the Sternritter Legion only has a few dozen people, they have the strength to wipe out all the Grim Reapers. Unohana's words stirred up 1,000 ripples. After recovering from her shock, Unohana questioned, "How is that possible? 1,000 years ago, Quincy's strength was only SOSO. It's impossible for him to defeat Soul Society." Seeing the disbelief on Unohana's face, Dustless chuckled and continued, "Take note, when I say all the Grim Reapers, I don't just mean Soul Society, but also Squad Zero." In the end, the Sternritter Legion did defeat the Godii 13 and reached the Spirit King Palace. Even Yawach's personal guards were wiped out. Ray, Yawach is a threat in the future. Don't forget that there's still a vicious dog eyeing Soul Society. He's just as ambitious and dangerous as Yawach. Dustless suddenly revealed. His tone was full of meaning, and a figure immediately appeared in Unohana's mind. "You mean Sosuke Aizen?" Her thoughts paused for a second as Unohua Lai couldn't help but say, "I've always felt that he was very dangerous. He always looked harmless on the surface, but he always gave me the feeling of a poppy flower." "You're so smart." Dustless looked at Unohana Retsu in surprise. He had a new understanding of this woman's intelligence. She was probably the only one in the Godii 13 who could see through Sosuke Aizen. But he's very meticulous. It'll be difficult to catch him. Unohana Retsu frowned. She felt that Sosuke Aizen was a difficult opponent. That's normal. Dustless's expression didn't change. Aizen was wise and shrewd, and he had Kyoka Suigetsu to protect him from the wind and rain. The chance of catching him was close to zero. What did Soul Society do? Unohana Retsu sighed. Unohana Retsu let out a long sigh. Her voice was filled with worry as she said in annoyance, "Before, Yawach was already a headache, and now there's you and Sosuke Aizen. Plus, that Yawach that should have died is about to see the light of day again. Soul Society is truly plagued with disasters." "Who knows?" Dustless shrugged. Soul Society was indeed in a difficult situation. It was synonymous with tragedy. Whether it's a coincidence or fate, Soul Society is about to face a great change. Which side will you side with in the end? Then the room became silent. Dustless waited for Unohana Retsu's decision. She was smart and knew what to choose. Unohana Retsu rolled her eyes at Dustless and said helplessly, "If it's really like what you said, I have no choice." Looking at Dustless, Unohana Retsu didn't need to say anything. Hearing this, Dustless's lips curled into a smile. He hugged Unohana Retsu and was about to do the most primitive thing, when an untimely voice sounded. "I only agreed to help you, but I never said I'd give myself to you." Unohana Retsu couldn't help but laugh at Dustless's anxiousness. "What does that have to do with anything? Since we're already honest with each other, why don't we take it a step further? We're in the same boat anyway." Dustless directly pulled off the towel on his body, revealing his strong body. "No." Unohana Retsu refused again. Although her voice was as soft and pleasant as before, Dustless could hear the meaning behind it. "You dare to talk to me like this? Do you believe that I'll directly forget it?" Unohana Retsu poured a bucket of cold water on his head. Dustless was inwardly annoyed. Just as he was about to forcefully take Unohana Retsu's hand, he saw the sadness in her eyes, and the flames in his heart disappeared. There's still a long way to go. Now is not the time. After saying this, Dustless quietly hugged Unohana Retsu, feeling the warmth of each other's bodies. Perhaps it was because he was too tired recently, but a drowsy feeling spread throughout his body. Dustless was about to fall asleep when a soft, jade-like hand suddenly grabbed his most important part. His pupils instantly opened and enlarged several times. Looking over, he saw that it was Unohana Retsu, who had a shy expression. "I'm sorry, Chinjun. I still have some things to do right now. I'll leave them to you in the future." Seeing Dustless's gaze that could melt a person, Unohana Retsu lowered her head. The hard thing in her hand made her feel awkward. "Please continue. Do whatever you want. Ignore me." After saying this, Dustless closed his eyes in satisfaction. Chapter 1072. It was not until 2 hours later that Wu Chen walked out of the hot spring dizzily. His expression was absent-minded and his eyes were filled with confusion. Looking strangely at the calm Unohua lie beside her, Wu Chen felt ashamed of her inferiority. She was sure that Unohua Lai was still a virgin, but her knowledge in certain aspects made Wu Chen, a veteran in the field of flowers, feel ashamed. According to Unohua Lai, "I was born to understand those things. TSK, I finally have an ally in Soul Society, and one that is extremely reliable." Dustless smiled as he looked at Unohua Lai's back. Originally, he had wanted to tempt Unohua Lai into putting her hands on his mouth in order to pursue the feeling of the extreme. At first, Unohua Lai had rejected him resolutely, leaving no room for negotiation. Later, after Dustless signed a few unfair terms, Unohua Lai accepted Dustless's suggestion and used her mouth to seduce Dustless. Even until now, Wu Chen still hadn't had enough of the feeling of walking on clouds. His mind was still in a trance, and the scene of Unohua Lai lying on top of him kept echoing in his mind. Smiling so wretchedly, "I'm sure you're up to no good." Unohua Lai turned her head and glanced at Dustless. Seeing his naughty smile, she felt awkward. In reality, she had done those actions under Dustless's half-threat and half-seduction. Now that she thought about it, she felt angry and regretful. Unohua Lai's throat was still very uncomfortable, and her jawbones were not normal when she spoke. "You must have used some trick to make me lose my mind, and that's why you succeeded." Unohua Lai's eyes shone with an ominous glint as she looked like she wanted to swallow Dustless alive. "What does that have to do with me?" Dustless was speechless. Unohua Lai was even more aggressive than him just now. This woman had been suppressed for 1,000 years. Once her conservative feelings were released, the destructive power she could create was enormous. Even though it was only an hour, Dustless was almost squeezed dry. He was swaying left and right. "All right, I used an illusion to trick you." Dustless could not take it anymore and said helplessly. She knew that Unohua Lai was trying to make things difficult for her. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, a huge spiritual pressure exploded, and a destructive shockwave swept through the entire Soul Society. Dustless and Unohua Lai, who were thousands of meters away, could feel the violent tremors. Unohua Lai and Dustless looked at each other and frowned. Dustless said, "From the nature of the spiritual pressure, it seems to be outside of void and death. Could it be that Sosuke Aizen has created another monster?" Unohana Retsu guessed. After Dustless's reminder, she already knew most of Sosuke Aizen's experiments. Dustless even used Tsukuyomi to let Unohana Retsu see what Sosuke Aizen was doing. It shouldn't be. Strange, this spiritual pressure is somewhat familiar. Wu Chen said. He always felt that he had seen this powerful spiritual pressure before. "Let's go take a look together." Seeing Dustless's confusion, Unohana Retsu suggested. "There's no need for that. I feel like something's not right this time. Just leave this matter to me." Wu Chen shook his head resolutely. Although he was very confident in Unohua Lai's strength, and the First Sword 8 was extremely powerful, he was not an invincible existence. There were many people who could suppress Unohua Lai. Bringing Unohana Retsu would be a problem. Especially Dustless's right eye twitched. He felt like this was not normal. "I'll be going first, Retsu." Before Unohana Retsu could reply, Dustless turned into a flash of light and disappeared into the clear sky. In an open area, two beautiful figures were lying down. One was wearing a short skirt, and the other had long green hair. Both had great figures, and they were both women. They were wearing the same uniform, so they were obviously from the same faction. Bambietta and Candace. What's going on? Shouldn't they be in Wandless Empire? Why are they in Soul Society? It seems like they are being attacked by the death gods. Dustless, who had rushed over, was shocked. He extended his eye power to the limit and made sure he was not mistaken. Could it be that Jugram found out that they betrayed Yawach? That shouldn't be the case. Even if he found out that they betrayed Yoch, he should have killed Candace and Bambietta. Leaving them in Soul Society is too stupid. That might have exposed Wandless Empire. Dustless's train of thought hit a dead end. He started to think about Jugram's intentions, but he could not figure it out. At the same time, the death gods on the ground were attacking Candace and Bambietta. The death gods leading them were actually the smiling Ikamaru Jin and Mayuri. It's rare to see Quincy like you. Be careful. Don't kill them. These two Quincy girls are my test subjects. If you hurt them, I'll make you pay with your lives. Mayuri raised his voice and roared, his tone carrying a warning. Strange. Their strength seems to have weakened a lot. Dustless, who was quietly observing, was puzzled. The two girls used to be captains, but now they were not even as strong as vice-captains. They were at a disadvantage and were in a bitter fight. No matter what, Candace and Bambietta cannot be lost. In that case, I can only kill you death gods first. I have to kill them without anyone knowing. With a decision in his mind, the vigorous spiritual pressure in Wu Chen's body suddenly began to surge. Currently, Candace and Bambietta were very useful to Dustless, and it was necessary to find out why their strength had decreased. Therefore, in order not to be exposed, he had to eliminate Ikamaru Jin and Mayuzumi Riki. Chapter 1073. The captain's strength was extremely powerful. Even a scientist like Mayuri was extremely strong, especially through various abnormal experiments to improve his strength, which was also unique. Although the method was not complementary, it was undeniable that some of Mayuri's research was very useful. Captain Dustless, what brings you here? It's rare. Mayuri looked up at the black spot that was rapidly approaching and couldn't help but ask in confusion. While talking, Dustless also landed on the ground only a few steps away from Nico Ray and Ikamaru Jin. How did you find them, Captain Mayuri? Pointing at Candace and Bambietta, who were besieged, Dustless asked as usual, the Technology Development Bureau doesn't seem to have the time to search for Quincy. Of course not, looking for this group of trash? What a joke. They're just test subjects. I'm very busy, and I don't have time to look for this group of white mice. Thank you, Captain Jin. Mayuri's face was flushed, and there was a hint of gratitude in his tone as he said excitedly, this is all thanks to Captain Ikamaru Jin. She was the one who provided me with the traces of these two Quincy. Furthermore, there's something wrong with these two Quincy girls. They're completely different from the Quincy that I studied before. At the end of his words, Mayuri waved his arms, and his slender fingertips jumped with cold light, which could easily pierce the skin, making people shudder. So it's Jin. Hearing this, Dustless's gaze immediately turned to Jin, and his eyes turned cold. At the same time, Jin also looked at Dustless, and his eyes were full of ridicule and schadenfreude, waiting for Dustless to make a fool of himself. Captain Jin, after sorting out his thoughts, Dustless was not in a hurry to act, but asked directly, these two are Quincy, you should at least explain their origin. Yes, where did these two guys come from? Mayuri nodded wildly, and his face was surging with morbid excitement. He said fanatically, they must have accomplices. Catch them all and send them to my operating table. This is the essence of Quincy's existence. Ikamaru Jin was extremely calm when he heard this. He had expected this. When I was patrolling Luhun Street, I noticed unusual Ryatsu fluctuations. When I rushed over, I happened to meet these two Quincy. I originally wanted to kill them directly, but I heard that Captain Ye was recently doing experiments on Quincy, so I found him. Ikamaru Jin spoke with assurance. His words were clear and logical, without any loopholes for others to exploit. Looks like Jugram noticed their abnormality. Dustless lowered his head and looked at Jin. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he thought, this is definitely not a coincidence. Aizen and Jugram finally joined hands. Ikemar Jin was just Sosuke Aizen's lackey. Now that he's come out to bite people, Sosuke Aizen must have instigated him. Let's get rid of them as soon as possible and let the two of them escape. Sensing that there was no one around, Dustless immediately made a decision. I deeply admire Captain Ye's persistent pursuit of science, but there's only one worry. This inexplicable sentence suddenly attracted Mayuri's attention. Frowning, Mayuri asked, "Worry? Captain Dustless using such vulgar words to describe me is too tasteless." Mayuri said with dissatisfaction, but he still asked curiously, "What's more, there's absolutely nothing in this world that I don't understand. What are you referring to?" "You definitely don't understand this." "That's right, the world doesn't understand, including myself." With a bloodthirsty smile on his face, Dustless said mysteriously, "This guy, what's wrong with him today?" Ikemar Jin's smile disappeared, and his heart suddenly throbbed, as if he was being stared at by an invisible ancient beast. He felt uncomfortable and uneasy. Looking at Dustless, his eyes were full of vigilance. "There's nothing in this world that I don't understand, tell me." Mayuri raised his voice and said impatiently, "Does that so? In that case, I'll fulfill Captain Ye's wish." The murderous aura hidden all over his body instantly solidified, and the nearly solidified Ryatsu directly locked onto Mayuri and Ikemar Jin. Sensing that something was wrong, Ikemar Jin's pupils shrunk, and he immediately retreated without hesitation. "You don't understand the miserable state you'll be in after being killed." Dustless spat out cold air, and the murderous aura in his body boiled. The black sharp light was faintly discernible, filling the surrounding space, and surrounded Mayuri and Ikemar Jin. The corner of his mouth slightly opened, and under Mayuri's stunned gaze, countless black lights eroded him. 8090, Black Coffin. The black lights that surrounded the two of them instantly turned from nothingness to reality, and released a terrifying cold light. There were tens of thousands of them, and each ray of light was extremely fatal. Ikemar Jin and Mayuri were like an extremely dense magnetic field, attracting all the black lights. "You bastard." Mayuri's voice hadn't even fallen when the massive black light brushed past his shoulder. "Pucci! Pucci! Pucci!" The densely packed blades slanted from all directions, instantly crushing Mayuri's entire body, mercilessly tearing apart his fragile skin, destroying his internal organs, and in the blink of an eye, he was turned into a human stick, and his blood flowed like a river. Although Ikemar Jin had fled in advance, he was still in a miserable state, and he was barely gasping for breath. "You are a pervert. This kind of death is very suitable for you, Captain Ye. There's no need to thank me." Glancing at Mayuri, who was no longer in a human shape, Dustless's face was filled with indifference, and he turned around and walked towards Ikemar Jin with his sword in hand. Chapter 1074. Ikemar Jin could no longer maintain his sly smile. He was terrified as he touched the wounds all over his body. He had never felt that he was so close to death. In that instant just now, if he hadn't sensed the danger of Wuchen, perhaps he would have been cut into pieces by countless blades just like Nirvana Cocoon. It was extremely miserable. "Get out of my way!" Along with a delicate shout, Candace and Bambietta pushed back the death gods who were besieging them. They were temporarily out of danger. They glanced at Wuchen helplessly and hurriedly left. They were just burdens to Wuchen now. "You bastard, I will not let you go." Nye Huli struggled on the brink of death. His entire body had been turned into a human stick. His limbs were broken, but he was still gnashing his teeth at Wuchen. His distorted face wished he could tear Wuchen into pieces. "Ah." Hearing this, Dustless glanced at Mayuri and sneered, "Tear me into pieces? With your level? Don't joke around, close your eyes in peace, Captain Mayuri." He gathered Ryatsu in his right hand, and a huge red disc flew out. Hado number 54, Waste Flame. Mayuri couldn't move an inch. The disc flame along with his body exploded into ashes. Mayuri, who was gritting his teeth, disappeared completely. Allah is really ruthless, killing a captain just like that. Ikamaru Jin forced a smile, but his body was bleeding non-stop. It was as if there was a hole in his body. But it's a pity that I'm not Mayuri, it's impossible to kill me. Ikamaru Jin grinned slightly, revealing a cold smile. He was very confident. Can't kill you? Hearing this, Dustless looked at him with disdain and sneered, I didn't kill you on purpose. I still have something to ask you, Captain Ikamaru Jin. For some people, it didn't matter if they were killed. They were just pawns, no big deal. For some people, they were more useful alive, so there was no need to kill them. Sure enough, these captains aren't simple. Each of them has a variety of trump cards. I'm afraid it won't be long before we leave Soul Society. Dustless's sharp senses detected that Nei Huli had turned into a mysterious liquid body and drilled into the crevice, leaving quietly. Is Sosuke Aizen's other Hogyoku completed? Dustless suddenly asked. Ikamaru Jin was shocked. You know that Captain Aizen is developing Hogyoku? Ikamaru Jin's heart was in turmoil, and he suddenly felt that his brain wasn't enough. The previous Hogyoku was destroyed by Dustless, and now he was secretly developing a new one. Only he and Aizen knew about it. Looks like that is indeed the case. Then the source of the soul should be Jugram. Feeling relieved, Dustless immediately closed in on Jin Ikamaru like a storm. The Kusanagi sword in his hand came down in torrents, wanting to split Jin Ikamaru in half. Shocked, Ikamaru Jin immediately reacted violently. On top of his head, there was a faint blue light, and it quickly condensed into a solid wall. Bakudo 81, Skybreaker. Naive. Dustless saw this and just gently raised his finger, and a ray of golden light gathered at the tip of his foot. Lightspeed kick. The extremely dense light slanted down and hit the transparent barrier. Looks like it was blocked. Jin breathed a sigh of relief, and the goosebumps all over his body also calmed down. For a long time, Dustless's strength was like a nightmare that shrouded him and Aizen's heart. Blocked? Indeed, but that's just to attract your attention. A ghostly voice came from behind, and Jin felt a chill down his spine. His heart was in his throat, and he immediately retreated. However, in front of Dustless, that laughable speed was meaningless. He rushed forward, and the scorching hot sword light pierced through Jin. Puchi. On Jin's chest, a long and narrow scar was extremely conspicuous, and it almost covered his entire abdomen. His body was like a kite with a broken string, shaking uncontrollably. Clang. With his Zanpakuto on the ground, Jin raised his head and looked at the approaching figure. His body was extremely weak, and the scarlet wound on his chest was quickly devouring his vitality, stamina, and energy. It was just a simple slash, but it was enough to crush Jin's arrogance and kill him within seconds. They were not at the same level at all. This guy is the same kind of monster as Aizen. Jin's brain cells were thinking 10 times faster than usual. However, a black shadow approached him and coldly raised his Zanpakuto. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At this moment, another beautiful figure stood in front of Ikamaru Jin, staring at Dustless. Runju! Get out of the way! Dustless's tone softened. Captain Mayuri has already informed the entire Soul Society of what you did. Matsumoto Runju shook her head and pulled out her Zanpakuto. Looking at Matsumoto Runju's serious expression, Dustless smacked his lips and said apologetically, I'm sorry, Runju. I pulled you guys into the 7th Division, but in the end, I didn't give you anything and ended up in this situation. Whoosh whoosh, 2 more figures appeared on the ground. They weren't tall, but they were Rukia and Hinamori. The head captain and the rest of the division captains are here. Captain, you should surrender and don't do anything stupid. Rukia and Hinamori also advised. Hearing this, Dustless smiled, and the Kusanagi sword in his hand glowed brighter. If that's the case, I can only destroy the Godii 13. Chapter 1075. It was a casual sentence, but it was as simple as eating and drinking. It was full of confidence and disdain for the Shinigami. There were no superfluous emotions, only naked contempt. You three should leave this place. The next battle is beyond your imagination, and it's not suitable for you. The light of the Kusanagi sword dimmed a bit. Dustless chose to let them go. Under the boundless spiritual pressure perception, Wuchen clearly captured the traces of the captains galloping over. The three girls looked at each other and surrounded Dustless at the same time. You are still too weak, and this stage is not suitable for you. Try your best to survive in the future. Suddenly, a powerful repulsive force came out of his body, and they were easily killed. Shinra Tensei, Matsumoto Ranjaku, Hinamori, and Rukia were all sent flying. Dustless also remembered their old friendship and didn't hurt them. Great sinner, 7th Division Captain, Dustless. A roar filled with endless anger resounded through the sky, and a ferocious shadow behind him covered the sky. An enormous giant with a dignified expression and an ancient, solemn and dignified aura appeared. His entire being was even larger than a gigantic mountain. His murderous intent locked onto Dustless, and he couldn't wait to eat him alive. 9th Division Captain, Sakuma Suigen. Dustless glanced at Sakuma Suigen coldly, then looked at the void in front of him. Just bring it on, and don't expect me to repent. There were several black shadows attacking from that direction. Great sinner, Genrisai-sensei trusted you so much, and you betrayed him. Sakuma Suigen said angrily with hatred. Hearing this, Wuchen frowned coldly and said mockingly, "Stop lying. You just want to take revenge for East Deity. If you have any means, just bring it on." As if the wound in his heart had been pierced, Suigen suddenly flew into a rage. Clang, clang, clang. With a roar, the giant saber was pulled out of its sheath. It was more than 10 meters long, shining with cold light under the refraction of the sun. It could easily cut Soul Society into pieces. It's just a facade. Dustless's eyes were fixed on the front the whole time. Only those figures could move Dustless. As for Suigen, he was just a noob who could kill him with one move. Die! The huge long blade was filled with the anger of the left side of the village. It fell down mercilessly. The powerful force was enough to annihilate the whole world, leaving behind afterimages visible to the naked eye. Dustless didn't try to block it, nor did he try to dodge it. Therefore, the left formation of the immortal village successfully hit him. Ka. On the ground, the center of the impact directly collapsed, revealing an incomparably huge crack that rapidly spread to the surroundings. In the blink of an eye, the ground within a radius of a few hundred meters was stirred up into a mess. He was so weak that he couldn't even withstand a single blow. That's all. Mayuri said that we should all move out. That guy has really become stupid from doing experiments all day long. Sakuma Suigen curled his lips in disdain. When he was about to withdraw his blade, he was stunned. Strange, what's going on? Looking down at the ground covered in smoke, Sakuma Suigen was stunned. Even with all his strength, the Black Rope Wrath Wisdom King's blade couldn't move. It was as if the blade was stuck in a crack between the rock walls. It was impossible to pull it out. How can this be? Did he use too much strength and cut the ground into two halves to trap the blade? It shouldn't be. Sakuma Suigen was puzzled. Realizing that something was wrong, he stomped his feet and the dust on the ground returned to normal. Sakuma Suigen was stunned when he saw the thin figure on the ground. Dustless only used one hand to grab the blade of the Black Rope Wrath Wisdom King. You're so big. As for your strength, are you tickling me? I don't feel anything at all, Captain Sakuma. Tickling can help others stop their itch, but you can't even stop my itch. Useless trash. With the other hand gently flicking the huge blade, Dustless showed a contemptuous smile, and his body erupted with a violent wave, forcing Sakuma Suigen to retreat. Heido number 88, Flying Dragon Strikes Thief, Sky-Shaking Thunder Run. The thick beam of light instantly drowned the huge Bankai, the Black Rope Wrath Wisdom King, and hit its face. Its huge body couldn't bear the heavy burden and fell to the ground. As the host, Sakuma Suigen was also seriously injured. His dog face was severely burned, and his hair was even burned. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At the same time, several more figures appeared on the ground. Without exception, all of them were wearing the captain's haori. They looked menacing, and their eyes were staring at Dustless. "I hope you can give me a satisfactory explanation, Captain Dustless," Yamamoto shouted in a hoarse voice. There was a blazing fire behind him. It seemed that if Dustless didn't give a reasonable explanation, he would be burned to ashes. Explanation? That kind of excuse doesn't matter. Dustless was unusually perfunctory. He looked around at the captains and finally fixed his eyes on the captain. "The key is my explanation useful to you?" Mayuri's testimony and Aizen Sosuke's Kyoka Suigetsu, all of them pointed to Dustless. He couldn't explain it clearly even if he had 100 mouths, so the so-called explanation was useless. According to Dustless's guess, Old Man Yamamoto just wanted to find a reason to attack. "You're already so old and you still want to play this game. What a useless taste, vulgar." He deliberately raised his voice, full of sarcasm, and these words fell in everyone's ears. Everyone was worried about Dustless's courage, and they were afraid that the captain would directly release his Zanpakuto and kill Dustless. This was a joke with his life. Chapter 1076. As expected, Dustless's words attracted the head captain's hostility. However, there were too many people who wanted to flatter the head captain. Before the head captain could do anything, someone else took his place and attacked Dustless. Bakudo 63, 6-rod light prison. 6 enormous light ribbons attacked from all directions. In the blink of an eye, Dustless was restrained, and his entire person was fixed and unable to move. "Captain Aizen, you've been working so hard to deal with me. You've been trying so hard to set up all kinds of schemes." His gaze fell on the elegant man. The one who took the head captain's place was Sosuke Aizen, who was filled with righteous indignation. Sosuke Aizen ignored Dustless's sarcasm with a smile of victory on his face. He was the only one who could see it. "It's over." Captain of the 7th Division, a burst of cold light struck. In an instant, a proud little loli flashed in front of Wu Chen and used her special golden weapon to touch Wu Chen's throat. It was the captain of the 2nd Division, Soi Fan. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Not only that, the other captains also rushed over and subdued Dustless in an instant. Dustless was completely surrounded by captains all around him. His throat, arms, legs, and other organs were all restrained. It seemed like the outcome was already decided. There was no way out for Dustless. "The head captain trusted you so much, but you betrayed him." Aizen pointed at Dustless with a trembling finger as he reprimanded him. Aizen's eyes were spitting fire, and his murderous intent was obvious. Aizen's acting was flawless, and there wasn't a single flaw in it. Everything was so perfect, extremely practiced, and there were no flaws. Dustless glanced at Sosuke Aizen and said, "If your strength and acting were at the same level, you would be invincible, Captain Aizen." "Humph. Don't invert right and wrong, everyone's eyes are clear. Even if I'm not strong enough, don't forget that the Godii 13 is a team." Aizen Sosuke retorted. Staring at Dustless's calm eyes, Aizen Sosuke felt that he was being looked down upon. Dustless's calm eyes were looking at him as if he was a clown. "Hurry up and put handcuffs on this traitor." Soi Feng's expression turned cold as she ordered her subordinates. Hearing this, the black-clothed Xing Jun rushed over and put the black handcuffs and leg cuffs on Dustless's feet and hands. It seemed that he felt that it wasn't safe enough, so he deliberately added a few more handcuffs. After all, this guy was a captain-level Grim Reaper, so he had to take special care of him. "In that case, it's finally over," Soi Fen said casually, but her tone was bleak. She was clearly dissatisfied with the ending. A captain was captured so easily without any resistance. He was even easier to deal with than a normal thug. How boring. "Little girl. You're right, it's indeed over." Looking at the handcuffs on his hands and feet, Dustless didn't react at all. His movements were normal, as if they didn't exist. He didn't even need to use his hands and feet to deal with this group of people. However, The one that's about to end and become history is Soul Society. Dustless said coldly. Everyone was stunned when they heard that. They glared angrily at Wu Qin. Their gazes were filled with dissatisfaction. They were about to open their mouths to teach this arrogant kid a lesson. A strange sense of danger appeared in everyone's heart. Wang. The ground trembled slightly, and the dust particles moved along with it. The tremors went from small to large, tearing holes in the ground. Then, under everyone's shocked gaze, the ground began to change drastically. Kakaka, a terrifying force tore the ground apart, revealing the depths of the ground. Deep red magma was boiling, and the high temperature made everyone's heart turn cold. Could it be? Seeing this scene, Head Captain Yamamoto's face changed, and an absurd idea appeared in his mind. His old eyes subconsciously looked at Dustless, and his heart turned cold. He used all his strength to remind him, "Get out of there, this is 96 Tao Breaker, cremation. The consequences of being hit are unimaginable." All the captains' faces changed, and they all retreated, distancing themselves from Dustless. "It's too late." With a sneer, Dustless's face turned cold. Tao Breaker's 96 Tao Breaker, cremation. A large dark red knife-shaped flame rose from the ground, and the clear sky instantly turned dark red. All the moisture in the atmosphere, including the spiritual droplets, evaporated. The huge destructive force pulled the entire Soul Society in, and several cracks that stretched for several kilometers appeared on the ground. Looking from the sky to the ground, the central area where Dustless stood, within a radius of 10 kilometers, had almost turned into black charcoal and a forbidden land. Bang bang bang. This kind of indiscriminate attack completely ignored the existence of distance, and running was useless. Immediately, several captains fell like birds with broken wings. Floating bamboo. Captain Shiomu. Captain Zaraki. The members of the various teams who rushed over looked at their own burnt captains, and they were all stunned for a moment. All of them looked at Dustless with handcuffs and leg cuffs in horror. What kind of monster is this guy? Even with handcuffs and leg cuffs, he can still kill 3 captains in an instant? This is simply cheating. Although Dustless's figure was very thin, it made everyone retreat. When they were glanced at by his cold eyes, they felt a sense of panic as if they had fallen into hell. Chapter 1077. The surrounding reapers were stunned, and their hearts almost jumped out of their chests. That's not right. That kind of large-scale Hado was obviously centered around him. Why is he not injured? That's right. I just saw that he was hit, but he was still fine. How is this possible? If the Hado could severely injure the 3 captains, it must be able to injure him too. Humph. Ignorant and inexperienced. I heard recently that the members of the other divisions are saying that the captain of the 7th division is a monster. Is he really a monster? I've also heard this rumor. Head Captain Yamamoto's face turned ugly when he heard these discussions. Cold light condensed in his eyes as he stared at Dustless. He seemed to have thought of something as he gritted his teeth and said, "Kenpachi Ghost Yencheng was also killed by number 96 Hado. Is this related to you?" Dustless did not deny it as he slightly moved his sore body. That's right. In order to become the captain of the 11th division, I did kill him in Hueco Mundo. It just so happened that that guy didn't like me, and I didn't like him, so I just killed him in Hueco Mundo. You bastard! Head Captain Yamamoto's eyes were about to burst out of his sockets. High-density hot Ryatsu erupted from his body. Although he did not do anything, a large area of the void behind him was strangely burning, and the ground was turned into black charcoal. Suppressing the surging killing intent in his heart, Old Man Yamamoto suddenly thought of the captain who had recently met with an accident. He shouted in a deep voice, "Captain Shiba should also be killed by you." This old man knows his character. He would never do something like turning into a void. I did injure him. In order to fight with me, he lost all his Ryatsu power. However, it is an indisputable fact that he turned into a void. Dustless said casually. He had done so many bad things that he could not even count them. What's your purpose? This old man thinks that I have treated you well. Since the establishment of the Godii 13, you are the only one who joined the Reapers within a year and became the captain." Head Captain Yamamoto roared. His suppressed voice was like the sign of a volcanic eruption. If Dustless did not give him a reasonable explanation, the sharpness of Ryujin Jaka would definitely burn the entire Soul Society. "Stop lying." Wu Qin snorted and sneered. "There are only two reasons why you promoted me so quickly. First, Soul Society can't just ignore a stranger who is as strong as a captain. Second, you want me to be the captain so that you can monitor me better. This will cause a lot of conflicts in the Godii 13. Many people don't like me, so they will turn their attention to me. This is a covert surveillance." "So what?" Seeing that his purpose was exposed by Dustless, Head Captain Yamamoto still did not give up. "If you are willing to be loyal to Soul Society, I even wanted to pass the position of Head Captain to you." Head Captain Yamamoto's shocking words made all the captains look at each other. The Head Captain passed it down to me? What a surprise. Dustless's calm eyes surged with ripples. He had indeed not expected this. Soon after, he said indifferently, "Unfortunately, my goal is the exact opposite, to kill the Spirit King and replace him as the ruler of the world." Hearing this, Yamamoto, the barrel of gunpowder that had been accumulating for a long time, finally exploded. Boom, 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 vast spiritual pressure spread across the entire Soul Society. The originally clear sky suddenly turned into a scorching sun. Head Captain Yamamoto's spiritual pressure spread across the entire Soul Society. A giant flaming sword appeared above the heads of all creatures, which could easily end the lives of all creatures. Creatures were going extinct, rivers had dried up, and all life in Soul Society was facing an unprecedented catastrophe. Head Captain Yamamoto had lived for thousands of years, but the number of times he used Zanpakuto could be counted on one hand. The reason was that the power of Ryujin Jaka was too terrifying. It was a double-edged sword. If he used it for a long time, it could destroy the entire Soul Society. As for the number of times he used Bankai, it was even less. In his long life, Head Captain Yamamoto only used Bankai to deal with Yawatch. "You treacherous and evil man, do you understand what you are saying?" Old Yamamoto said as he pulled out Ryujin Jaka from its scabbard. He was so angry that the veins on his forehead bulged. Facing the monstrous Head Captain Yamamoto, Dustless said without fear, "Of course I understand what I am saying. Old man, don't be so stubborn. Your thinking is too rigid. After I become Soul King, your Shinigami will have to thank me." Soul King didn't have the slightest combat power. They were extremely protected by Soul Society. Squad Zero almost never left their side. And the benefits of Dustless becoming Soul King were self-evident. It meant that Squad Zero would be liberated and wouldn't have to stay in the Soul King Palace forever. At the same time, Dustless himself was a top fighter. It was almost impossible to kill him. Why would this old man trust a traitor like you? If you want me to trust you, go to Avicii Hell and stay there for 100,000 years. Old Yamamoto's compassion flashed by. Although he was very tempted by Dustless's proposal, he rejected it without hesitation because it was impossible. Soul King couldn't be replaced. There was only one from the beginning to the end. Once he died, Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, including the modern world, would completely collapse. Even if Dustless really had the ability to take down the Spirit King, Old Man Yamamoto and Team Zero did not dare to take the risk. If they were not careful, it could lead to the end of the three realms, the modern world, Hueco Mundo, and Soul Society. Soul Society couldn't afford such a heavy price. Shinigami couldn't afford it. It was heavier than annihilating Godii 13. Chapter 1078. Yamamoto's anger spread throughout Soul Society. He originally thought that Dustless was dissatisfied with Soul Society, but he didn't expect him to target Soul King. This has crossed Yamamoto's bottom line, and he couldn't tolerate it. Boom, boom, boom. Surging spiritual pressure burst out unscrupulously, wanting to annihilate the entire Soul Society. The sharpness of Ryujin Jaka was beyond the imagination of the world, Especially now that head Captain Yamamoto was still angry, its power was even more terrifying. TSK. As expected of the strongest Zanpakuto, and this is under the condition of not releasing it. If it's released, the strongest Zanpakuto that can destroy the world is worthy of its name. Dustless sighed with emotion, his words were filled with desire and passion, and he made up his mind, such a good thing will increase my power to another level. I'll find time to go to the system to train old man Yamamoto and snatch his Ryujin Jaka. This exaggerated Zanpakuto could be called a perfect existence. The only flaw was that Ryujin Jaka was too powerful, and it could collapse the world with a raise of the hand. Old man Yamamoto, leave this guy to us captains, you'd better go and watch the battle, otherwise, Soul Society will be destroyed before the battle begins. Shunsui resisted the blazing Ryatsu and approached Yamamoto. Yes, Captain. All the captains nodded. Yamamoto's Ryatsu didn't distinguish between friend and foe, and the target was not only Dustless, but also the captains. He didn't severely injure Dustless, but defeated them first. This joke wasn't funny at all. It's not too late for you to go up when we can't do it. Shunsui suggested, looking at Dustless with murderous eyes. His good friend, Jushur Yukitake, was almost instantly killed by Dustless. Jushur Yukitake, who was already weak and sickly, was in an especially bad condition, and now he was only gasping for breath. Well, you all besiege this man together. It's best if you can capture him alive. I have some questions to ask him. If you can't, kill him on the spot. Yamamoto extinguished the violent Ryatsu all over his body, and said in a deep voice, "You bunch of trash want to deal with me?" Dustless sneered again and again. He looked at the captains with contempt and said sarcastically, "To deal with you captain-level minions, I'll give you both a handicap." His arrogant voice was like rolling thunder, spreading through the entire drifting Soul Street, the entire quiet Soul Courtyard, and the entire Soul Society. Ha! In that case, you can go to hell now, my former Sword 8. A crazy and ferocious smile came from behind, and Dustless suddenly looked up. A man with a burnt body stood up, holding a Zanpakuto full of sawtooth, and rushed towards Dustless. It was the current captain of the 11th Division, Zaraki Kenpachi. How disappointing. I thought you'd make some progress, but it seems like I was wrong. A beast like you will never be enlightened. Glancing at Zaraki, Dustless ignored him. The spiritual pressure hidden in his body burst out for the first time since he came to Soul Society. Boom boom boom. Boundless golden light burst out with endless overbearingness. The void began to distort, and cracks began to appear on the ground. Everyone felt a tingling pain on their skin. This guy's spiritual pressure. What kind of joke is this? This is far from being comparable to captain-level Ryatsu. Shunsui said in disbelief, and immediately saw the cruel smile on Dustless's face, and thought to himself, could it be that this guy's spiritual pressure can be increased? Shunsui, who felt something was wrong, quickly exclaimed, and suddenly shouted at the Shinigami behind him, "Get out of here, this guy is far beyond the Shinigami dimension." Idiot, it's too late. Hearing this, Dustless curled his lips in disdain, and increased the spiritual pressure in his body. Boom boom boom. The rookie Grim Reapers in the surroundings exploded one after another. Their bodies turned into a bloody mist, and they were directly crushed to death by the violent spiritual pressure. Only Rukia, Matsumoto Ranju, and Hinamori were safe and sound. This was the result of Dustless deliberately going easy on them. TSK, using spiritual pressure to injure those rookies is nothing. Your opponent is me. Zaraki curled his lips in disdain and immediately ran again at an extremely fast speed. Boom boom boom. Zaraki didn't hesitate to take off his blindfold, and a vast amount of spiritual pressure began to erupt, and the Shinigami who were affected by it vomited blood. Who is this bastard helping? When the captains saw this, they cursed Zaraki Kenpachi and secretly scolded him. Idiot, I don't even need to fight with someone like you who only knows how to kill. Seeing this, Wuchen sneered again and again. He stared at Zaraki, and a long-lost mysterious power in his body quietly erupted like a flash flood. His boundless might was not inferior to spiritual pressure. Unlike spiritual pressure, the moment his spiritual pressure erupted, the distorted space was instantly torn apart by the tyrannical power like a mirror. Ka. This aura fell on Zaraki's body. Zaraki's expression changed drastically, and he immediately began to slow down. He was like a tortoise crawling, and his whole body directly crushed the ground. What's this momentum? The captains looked at Dustless in disbelief, and it was difficult for them to breathe. Their bodies instantly became 100 times heavier, and it was extremely difficult for them to move. Zaraki was directly crushed by Dustless's momentum, and his whole body was half kneeling on the ground, sweating all over, and he could only look up at Dustless, who was close at hand. It was impossible for him to move an inch, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of surrender in his heart. After the fusion of Haushikuhaki and spiritual pressure, the power is naturally unprecedented. Seeing this scene, Dustless's performance was mediocre, and there was no sadness or joy. The so-called captains were a group of trash. Destroying them was not worth being proud of. Chapter 1079. Zaraki Kenpachi was aghast as he looked at Dustless, who was close at hand. He felt a huge sense of frustration in his heart. It was extremely difficult for him to make even an inch of progress. His entire body was bleeding. This huge deterrence suppressed him tightly, and it was 100 times more difficult than usual to breathe. Bastard, how is this possible? He has been a Shinigami for a year. How can his Ryatsu be so strong? Aizen stared at Dustless with unwillingness in his heart, and his eyes were dozens of times bigger than usual. Not only him, all the captain-level Shinigami looked extremely ugly, staring at Dustless with stunned eyes, and their faces turned red and white. Recalling Wu Chen's harsh words from before, their faces flushed red. "I'll give you both arms and legs." Even after half a day, this sentence was still in everyone's ears, like a thorn in everyone's heart. Looking at that thin body, everyone felt extremely incompetent. They were all captains, but there was a huge gap between them. This guy, no, I have to save them. Otherwise, the confidence of the captains will be crushed. Head Captain Yamamoto pulled out his Zanpakuto without hesitation, and the fire once again descended to the world, confronting Wuchen. The momentum of the two men each occupied half of the sky. Yamamoto's expression changed, and he released his Zanpakuto. All things in the world turned to ashes. Ryujin Jaka. Ryujin Jaka's body extended a blazing flame, and the power was extremely terrifying. Dozens of kilometers away, one could feel the restless Ryatsu of Old Man Yamamoto's body. Sure enough, if I don't use other abilities and only use the power of Shinigami, I'm afraid the one who will lose in the end will be me. Looking at Head Captain Yamamoto with an indifferent expression, Wu Chen had a clear understanding of his strength. With a grunt, Head Captain Yamamoto didn't appreciate it. He raised his hand and a powerful flame attack swept toward Wu Chen like a mountain pressing down on him. Fire-burning castle. In an instant, the sky around Dustless turned fiery red, and the surrounding air was impenetrable. The blazing flames formed a perfect wall of heat, trapping Dustless within. Phew! The flame barrier cut off Dustless's aura, and all the captains breathed a sigh of relief. The earth-shattering pressure also disappeared. These two fellows, if both of them can be seriously injured, that would be great. Aizen Sosuke's face was black as he clenched his fists. He never thought he would be so weak. Facing these two beasts, he wasn't their opponent. You guys should rest for a while. He can't break through the burning city wall? He actually walked out? How is this possible? Before Old Man Yamamoto's voice fell, Shuinsue's exclamation resounded. Dustless walked out of the flames as if nothing had happened, completely unscathed. You want to trap me with this kind of attack? Seems like the head captain likes to joke too. Dustless disdainfully curled his lips. His body was still emitting light, and his clothes were clean. Obviously, he didn't suffer any injuries. How is this possible? How did he do it? Yamamoto lost his calm, and his voice was trembling. Looking up, The flames from the burning city wall kept attacking Dustless, penetrating his body. Unfortunately, the effect was minimal. Dustless's body was flowing with golden light, and the damaged parts were repaired. His face wasn't red, and he wasn't out of breath. He was healthy and lively. That's not right. This guy just used the number 96 Hado, cremation. Isn't that a Hado sacrifice? How come he's also fine? Shunsui realized that something was wrong. These words stunned all the captains. Only then did they realize that Dustless was fine, and there were no traces of burns. Idiot, of course I'm fine. That's just a small injury, it's nothing. Hearing this, Dustless was as calm as a breeze. The Jubi's physique could repair all physical attacks. Scatter, Senbensker. The sky was filled with cherry blossoms, thousands of them, almost covering the entire void. No matter what kind of monster you are, if you're attacked by countless blades at the same time, you can only turn into a skeleton in the end. Kumubaya controlled thousands of cherry blossoms to attack. Everywhere they went, they were almost crushed into pieces. It was a mess. These beautiful cherry blossoms blotted out the sky, but in reality, every single one of them was a sharp blade. As long as one touched them, one would be scratched. The disastrous consequences of being attacked by hundreds of millions of blades at the same time were self-evident. Turn into a skeleton? Stop being so self-righteous. The spiritual pressure in his body was surging. Dustless didn't care. It was wishful thinking to think that such a flashy attack could hit him. Under the shocked gaze of all the captains, Dustless ignored the cherry blossoms in the sky. Instead, he was humming a horrifying tune. The cherry blossom blades cut Dustless's body back and forth, but it didn't have much effect. The elemental transformation directly repaired it. After a long time, they didn't even touch Dustless's body. On the other hand, Kumubaya, who was controlling a large number of cherry blossoms, was panting from exhaustion. Everyone attacked together. This treacherous criminal must be captured today. A group of captains pounced on Dustless. Each of them displayed their skills. The sky was filled with the ability to annihilate Dustless. It's about time. Dustless suddenly laughed secretly. He turned a deaf ear to the various attacks around him. Any physical attack was repaired by the elemental transformation. At the same time, Dustless looked at his chest. There was a gem embedded there that was shining brightly. It was the Hogyoku. The endless release of spiritual pressure before was actually intentional. It was to awaken the Hogyoku. Now, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to test the effects of the Hogyoku. Chapter 1080. This is the characteristic of Hogyoku. Only by wasting all the Ryatsu in the body will the Hogyoku transfer its own Ryatsu to the host. Hado 88, Flying Dragon Strikes the Thief. Wuchen didn't avoid the thick flash of light. He chose to fight back. Although the elemental transformation could ignore any physical attack, he didn't have that kind of special hobby of being hit by others. The Ryatsu in his body surged, Dustless opened his mouth slightly, and a huge flash whistled out. Hado 88, Flying Dragon Strikes the Thief. The same Hado was released by different people. Naturally, the power was different. The golden flash easily tore the blue light and destroyed it. How is this possible? They are all captains. How can the difference in strength be so big? The newly appointed captain of the 10th Division, Higashiya Toshiro, said with an ugly face, and at the same time, he didn't hesitate to release his Zanpakuto. Bankai, Daigurin Hyarinmaru. The Ryatsu surged several times, and the atmosphere instantly condensed. Higashiya Toshiro swung his Zanpakuto, and a cold light shot out, and the light was destroyed. Such a dangerous person, for the safety of Soul Society, we must suppress him. Higashiya Toshiro said sternly. Dustless gave him too much pressure, like a captain-level Shinigami meeting a novice. He can only be crushed. For the safety of Soul Society? You captains are really great. I'm ashamed of myself. There was a ripple in the void. Dustless crossed the layers of the void, and in an instant, he subdued Higashiya Toshiro, and the flash in his hand for a long time was blasted behind him. Laser! The straight flash slanted out, and under everyone's surprise, it penetrated Higashiya Toshiro. Pucci! A huge scorched hole suddenly appeared on Higashiya Toshiro's body. His pupils turned white, and he looked at the wound in disbelief, and fell to the ground unwillingly. Captain Higashiya! The Shinigami shouted worriedly, and looked at Dustless with a particularly weak gaze. What kind of monster is this guy? Captain-level Shinigami are like children in front of him. He can kill them with a raise of his hand. Some of the novice Shinigami who were not afraid of death looked at Dustless standing in the void, and couldn't help but tremble, and some even wet their pants. Everyone, don't act rashly. Jingle Chuanshue's face was full of caution and gloominess. He gave a few glances to the other captains, indicating that they should besiege Dustless together and not fight him alone. However, no matter what, there is always a hothead. Is this time you are the vanguard, AI-kun? Higashiya Toshiro. Duelist Shinigami Sun-level Shinigami. Toshiro Shinigami Shinigami Toshiro. Shinigami. He naturally heard Dustless's sarcasm and chose to retort. Captain Dustless, you said that you can defeat us without using your hands and feet, but it seems that you went back on your words. Dustless didn't deny it but said meaningfully, "Do you know what it means when a butcher picks up a gun to snipe his prey?" Captain AI-kun. AI-kun was stunned when he saw Dustless's evil smile. He was thinking about Dustless's meaning. It means that he already thinks that it's time to kill his prey, so he won't hold back. After that, Dustless turned into a storm and rushed towards Aizen Sosuke. Due to his terrifying Ryatsu, a large amount of golden light condensed behind him and rushed towards Aizen Sosuke. Dustless's every step distorted the void with his rhythm. He didn't need to use any technique, he just used his Ryatsu to suppress AI-kun. Is this guy crazy? He'll be finished if he uses up his Ryatsu. All the captains were dumbfounded as they looked at the sky that had been dyed gold. They all breathed their last with a gulp sound. This kind of desperate play had shocked everyone. This speed is just SOSO. Soi Fong, the captain of the 2nd Division, let out a muffled groan. She leaped into the air and leaped into the air. I actually lost to him in what I'm best at. AI-kun's face was pale as his expression changed. He twitched from time to time as he saw Dustless's Ryatsu. His self-esteem was shattered. AI-kun had always been proud of his Ryatsu, but Dustless's appearance mercilessly shattered his pride. Moreover, Dustless's time as a Shinigami was far less than AI-kun's. It was only a year. AI-kun had been a Shinigami for hundreds of years, but his efforts couldn't compare to Dustless's in a single year. He almost vomited blood as he suddenly realized that he had been living like a pig for hundreds of years. Hado's 91,000 hands bright sky cannon. Countless streaks of pink light swept out from the palm of his hand and shot towards Dustless in a destructive manner. Naive. Dustless's body glowed faintly as he used his elemental transformation to dodge the attack. He increased his Ryatsu and was about to rush towards AI-kun with even more ferocity when a delicate figure blocked Dustless's path. So. The black figure rushed over and appeared in front of Dustless in the blink of an eye. Her speed wasn't any slower than Dustless's as she punched towards Dustless. You're still too slow compared to me. Soi Fong coldly stared at Dustless. Seeing that he wasn't moved, she increased her strength by 30%. Smiling contemptuously, Wuchen said disdainfully, "You're fast, but your power is too weak." Dustless didn't even use his elemental transformation. He casually grabbed the incoming fist and threw Soi Fong to the horizon. Chapter 1081. The powerful force made it hard for Soi Fong to even stop her body. It was as if she was hit by a 10,000-ton meteorite. She was thrown hundreds of meters away before she could regain her balance. Monster, it must be a monster. Soi Fong took a deep breath to calm her emotions. Her gaze also changed from looking straight up to looking up. Idiot, I told you to attack together. Don't act rashly, or we will be defeated by this monster one by one. Shunsui looked around and warned. When he saw the remaining members on his side, he frowned. After fighting for so long, we are the only ones who keep losing people. That guy is still safe. Dustless held the Zanpakuto's hilt tightly and looked up at the sky like a god looking down on all living things. Byakuya was unwilling to give up. The gap between the two sides was too big, so big that it made them feel hopeless. This Shinigami, who had only been a Shinigami for 1 year, had surpassed their hundreds of years of hard work. Shunsui tried to persuade Byakuya, "Captain Byakuya, don't be so pessimistic. Don't forget that this is Soul Society, the headquarters of the Shinigami." As soon as his voice fell, Shunsui wished he could give himself a slap. The surrounding Reapers that were instantly killed were clearly visible. Just now, Dustless had only relied on his own aura and had effortlessly injured all the Reapers. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, a golden light swept across the sky and dyed the sky golden. The warm light fell from the sky, and it was completely different from the gentle sun. It was filled with destructive energy waves. Enchanting Sparrow Bee Lightning Whip. Thousands of golden light converged on Soi Fan's arm like a black hole. It was a giant sparrow bee, and it looked like the tail of a queen bee. This exaggerated enchanting is the opposite of assassination. Dustless turned to look at Soi Fan. Sensing the sharpness of the golden weapon, the first thing he thought of was the nuclear bomb in his previous life. It looks good on the surface, but I don't know how powerful it is. Soi Fan's expression turned serious, and she said, "You will understand soon." She mobilized the remaining spiritual pressure in her body and gathered it on her right arm. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The metal weapon that looked like a missile buzzed and emitted a dazzling glow under the sunlight. Disappear. The metal's mysterious Bankai had clearly reached its limit. Sofan let out a loud roar as the huge Bankai wrapped around her arm ignited in flames and shot out like a missile. Large weapons were particularly cumbersome, but their speed was surprisingly fast. In the blink of an eye, they were gone, leaving only a smoky afterimage in the clear sky. To think that we were looking forward to it. It turns out to be such a boring Bankai. Dustless curled his lips in disappointment and lost all interest. Spiritual pressure gathered at the tip of the blade. It was sparkling, translucent, and filled with beauty. As he raised his hand, a long and narrow crescent moonlight appeared. Boom, boom, boom. The biting cold slash tore apart the metal weapon, splitting it in half before exploding. The blazing heat wave could be felt from several kilometers away. Swish, swish. The cold light suddenly appeared, as fast as lightning. Wu Chen could only catch an inconspicuous black dot. "That's fast, Captain Sofong," Dustless said when he felt a slight movement in the space behind him. "I've already said that I'm best at speed." A gust of cold wind blew, and Sofong approached Dustless without him noticing. Her small weapon was pressed against Dustless's throat. "Is that so?" Dustless could not deny this point. He then said coldly, "However, I've already said that your speed is not bad, but your strength is not worth mentioning." His left eye spun rapidly, and a purple light flashed in the depths of his eye. An irresistible and intangible power spread out. Shinra Tensei. As if she had been punched in the face, Sofong was sent flying again. Like a willow branch swaying in the wind, she could not retaliate at all. Dustless took a step forward and was about to give Sofong a fatal blow, but the eyesore of cherry blossoms suddenly appeared and formed a sea of flowers, blocking Dustless's path. "Don't treat us like air." Shunsui and Byakuya flew into the air and glared at Dustless. The only ones left in the Godii 13 were Shunsui Kaiokura, Byakuya Aizen, and Yamamoto Yamamoto. The remaining captains had all lost their ability to fight. "In just a few exchanges, we've lost more than half of our captains, and this guy's expression is normal, and his spiritual pressure is not showing any signs of drying up. Ridiculous. We can't even be used as cannon fodder," Shunsui said gloomily. This was the first time they, as captains, had been defeated so mercilessly. "No need to be sad, just thank me. The rest of you are about to fall asleep on the ground." Sensing that there was not much spiritual pressure left in his body, Dustless took a step forward. His speed was beyond imagination, and he crossed 1,000 meters in a single step. The tip of the Kusanagi sword descended from the sky and slashed at Shuansue's head. Shunsui was shocked. Before the sword arrived, he felt an unprecedented aura of death. His whole body was cold, and he quickly thought of a countermeasure. Realizing that there was nothing he could do, he retreated unwillingly. It's not that Shunsui was timid, but he didn't want to make a meaningless sacrifice. This ordinary sword could easily cut down a grand virtual like Vasto Lord. When one's strength reached Dustless's level, it was like this. Even if it was the most insignificant attack, the destruction created was also world-shocking. Dustless secretly laughed, and his body instantly disappeared without a trace. Captain Shunsui, behind you. Shunsui was shocked when he heard this, and his pupils widened. He turned his head and looked at Dustless, who was holding his Zanpakuto high. He was obviously prepared for this. This guy can actually read my movements? Can he predict the future? Chapter 1082. Shunsui was shocked speechless. He never thought that the enemy could be as troublesome as Dustless. His strength was perfect, he could easily use destructive attacks, and at the same time, he could dodge any perfect sneak attack. Not only that, the mysterious purple eyes now seemed to be able to see the future, read people's hearts, and react in advance. Pucci! Scorching sword wounds spread all over his back. The Kusanagi sword ruthlessly slashed out, easily injuring Shunsui. His body instantly lost its support point and began to shake. You bastard! He turned around with difficulty, gritted his teeth to maintain his balance, and used all his strength to penetrate Dustless. Good chance! Seeing Dustless motionless like a statue, Shuansue's strength in his hand increased by 30%. Pucci! Jingle Shuansue's hopes were dashed and turned into a bubble. What replaced it was a dumbfounded expression. The saber light pierced through Wuchen's head, but the same scene happened again. The wound glowed with a warm luster and was instantly healed. Goodbye, Captain Shunsui. Dustless's expression was cold, light suddenly appeared under his feet, and mercilessly kicked Shunsui with all his strength. Light speed kick. Since they had shed all pretense of cordiality, Dustless naturally wouldn't show mercy to this group of captains. Boom boom boom. There was a loud rumbling sound in the sky. Shunsui finally couldn't maintain his body, and threw away the Zanpakuto in his hand. His charred body was still emitting visible black smoke, and Aizen and Byakuya watched in surprise. Boom! Shuansui's body slammed heavily on the ground, his face was unrecognizable, his hair was burned bald, and he looked very sloppy. Captain Shunsui. Keiki Byakuya's heart couldn't help but sink as he looked at Aizen Sosuke. Seeing that he showed no signs of joining forces and that his mind was wandering, Keiki Byakuya could only sit there like a trapped beast. After a few breaths, the sky was shrouded in a pink halo. The petals all over the sky danced above Dustless's head. The scenery was beautiful, and being in a sea of flowers made people involuntarily let down their guard. It's a pity, I was born a vulgar person, such a beautiful scenery, but I don't feel anything. Instead, I find it very annoying. Dustless looked up indifferently, and destructive energy fluctuations gathered at his fingertips. Yasakani no Magatama. Golden light flashed, and the power was extremely strong. There were more than tens of thousands of them, and they rushed into the sea of flowers in a tough manner, creating a large vacuum area. There were many light bullets formed by the Yasakani no Magatama, but in terms of quantity, these flower petals were superior. It was as if they could split. Not only did they not decrease, but they also increased as Kumu Baya's spiritual pressure increased. Finally, they formed a circle and surrounded Dustless. It's time. After a long while, Byakuyas. Senbonbonzakura. The floating petals around Dustless immediately gathered. Clearly, they were guided by Kuchiki Baya and turned into a large petal sphere hanging in the sky. An all-around attack with no blind spots? Dustless's low cry came from inside the giant sphere formed by pink petals. Looking around, countless petals tore at his body, and their sharpness was even sharper than a steel knife. It's this kind of thing over and over again. It's so boring. He casually grabbed a petal, but the texture was extremely strange. It was as hard as steel. Wither. With a slight force from his fingertips, Dustless's expression turned cold, and a black sphere immediately appeared behind him, its size constantly increasing in size. Kakaka. The moment this unassuming black sphere came into contact with the Senbenzakura petals, the blooming petals all collapsed, as if they had never existed, and disappeared without a trace. What is that? Byakuya was shocked. Inside the sphere formed by the petals, the huge black sphere expanded without limit, and all the petals that came into contact with it turned into nothingness. Dustless stood in it as if nothing had happened, yawning in boredom, and looked drowsy. Seeing this scene, Byakuya felt as if a sharp thorn had pierced into his heart. The pain was unbearable, and his self-esteem was trampled by Dustless. In the blink of an eye, one of Byakuya's strongest moves that he trusted collapsed. Don't put on such an incredulous expression. Using the truth-seeking ball to deal with this kind of thing is already giving you face, Dustless said indifferently as he looked at the absent-minded Byakuya. Huff. Suppressing his fluctuating heart, Byakuya raised his Zanpakuto, and countless petals fluttered again. The only difference was that they all gathered on both sides of his body. Final scene, White Sword Emperor. The dazzling white light on both sides turned from nothingness to reality, as if they were flapping their wings, and a supreme sword will came head-on. Dustless curled his lips in disdain when he saw this. He deeply despised such flashy moves and sneered, "These fancy moves are the true portrayal of you, incompetent." After saying that, Dustless did not wait for Byakuya to attack, and the remaining spiritual pressure in his body locked onto him, turning into countless black lights that devoured him. 90 of the broken path, black coffin. A deep black luster came from all directions, and although Byakuya noticed it immediately, just as he was about to dodge, 6 golden ribbons of light restrained his movements. 61 of the Bakudo 6 rod-like prison. Realizing that his body could not move, Byakuya's face suddenly collapsed, and his eyes changed back and forth. The light on both wings flapped, and then countless white lights whizzed out, trying to stop the invasion of the black lights. Ka. The black lights that came from all directions were successfully dispersed, turning into scattered spiritual particles that floated away. Byakuya heaved a sigh of relief, and just as he was about to use all his strength to deal with Dustless, a golden light whizzed over. The sharpness of the Kusanagi sword pierced through Byakuya. Chapter 1083. Head Captain Yamamoto, who was watching from the ground, felt dizzy. His old face, which looked like dead tree bark, trembled, and his drooping long beard stood straight up. The Godii 13 that he had painstakingly trained couldn't even withstand a single blow. They were all defeated in a few moves. Now, the only one left in the sky was Sosuke Aizen, who was facing Dustless. Heido number 88, Flying Dragon Strikes Thief. A flash of light shot up from the ground and locked onto Dustless in the sky. Yamamoto was the initiator of this attack. The Heido released by Yamamoto was naturally powerful. The thick beam of light made it hard for people to look at it directly. If they looked at it directly, their eyes would be dazzled, and they wouldn't be able to see anything clearly. My Ryatsu is almost used up. Dustless sighed when he sensed that there wasn't much Ryatsu left. Dustless glanced at the beam of light and used the last of his Ryatsu to counterattack. Bakudo number 81, Skybreaker. A transparent barrier appeared under Dustless's feet, blocking the impact of the 88 Heido. Boom boom boom. The light swept over, and the barrier shook violently. The barrier that was as thin as a cicada's wing and should have been easily broken was surprisingly easy to break. After a short stalemate, the light was extinguished. The thick beam of light was also gradually extinguished. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Yamamoto couldn't wait any longer and jumped in front of Dustless. He looked around and saw that only he and Sosuke Aizen were left. The rest of the Godii 13 had been wiped out. Captain Dustless's Ryatsu seems to have run out. Are you still planning to resist? Aizen's sharp eyes noticed that Dustless's Ryatsu had run out, and his tense nerves relaxed. He smiled and said, "Surrender. Maybe the captain will be merciful and let you go." Yamamoto was silent. His murderous intent gathered in his murky eyes. Wherever he looked, there was only silence. "You're right. As a Shinigami, my Ryatsu has indeed run out." Dustless didn't deny it. It was the truth. He's actually laughing? Is there something wrong with his head? Aizen scolded Sosuke in his heart. He was observant and he clearly saw the smile on Dustless's face. He didn't know why, but Aizen felt a chill down his spine. The spiritual pressure of the Grim Reaper has already reached the bottom? What do you mean by that? Could it be that you have the spiritual pressure of a void? Don't be so quick with your words. Yamamoto frowned and coldly snorted. This old man advises you to put down the sword in your hand immediately. The power of Ryujin Jaka is too strong. It will be difficult to save your life. Wu Chun smiled slightly when he heard that. These words were arrogant, but it was the truth. His face was incomparably dark, and his eyes were squinted. At this moment, Dustless was exceptionally terrifying and sinister. He smiled and said, "Sir Head Captain is indeed wise. Other than the spiritual pressure of the Grim Reaper, I do indeed have the spiritual pressure of the void." As soon as he finished speaking, Dustless's chest began to emit a milky white high-density spiritual pressure. Kakaka. His shirt instantly burst open, revealing his clean skin. His skin was as white as snow without any impurities. However, Yamamoto and Aizen's eyes were focused on the purple pearl embedded in Dustless's abdomen. At this moment, it was emitting a mysterious halo and endlessly transmitting spiritual pressure. The dried-up spiritual pressure in Dustless's body was filled to the brim in almost less than a second. Hogyoku! Yamamoto and Aizen Sosuke were shocked. They said the name of the mysterious sphere in unison. Their hearts were in their throats. If East Deity didn't say that Hogyoku was destroyed, how could it have fallen into his hands? Head Captain Yamamoto said with a pale face. He almost vomited blood when he sensed that Wuchun's Ryatsu had recovered instantly. I don't know. Aizen's face was also pale. He was sure that East Senpai didn't lie to him. The density of the Hogyoku embedded in Dustless's chest was extremely high. It was dozens of times higher than the one he made himself. Confused? That's right. The Hogyoku continued to erupt spiritual pressure, and Dustless's body gradually changed. A layer of milky white halo covered his entire body. His entire body was wrapped in a high-density spiritual pressure. I just used some small genjutsu to make East Senpai think that I destroyed the Hogyoku. In fact, that's not the case. The Hogyoku is such a heaven-defying object. Why would I destroy it? Dustless said with a smile. Looking at Captain Yamamoto and Aizen's expressions, it was as if they had eaten 10 pounds of flies. Dustless felt particularly happy. In fact, Urahara Kasuke also made a Hogyoku, and I took it. Together with the Hogyoku that East Senpai wanted, there were a total of 2. But now, I merged them into one Hogyoku. Yamamoto was startled when he heard this. He sensed that something was wrong and asked, "Impossible, you didn't leave Soul Society, and it's impossible for you to go to the modern world. The modern world is also monitored by Soul Society's Shinigami." No, Yamamoto suddenly thought of something, and his expression changed drastically. Did you use the gap in Hueco Mundo to go to the modern world to find Urahara Kasuke? You took the opportunity to steal his Hogyoku? Dustless shrugged and nodded, saying with a smile, "Sir Head Captain's analysis is reasonable." Yamamoto's body trembled, and he almost fell down. He was the one who approved Dustless's expedition to Hueco Mundo, but now it seemed that he had shot himself in the foot. Don't let this old guy die of anger. Aizen looked at the trembling Yamamoto, and a rare touch of pity rose in his heart. He was sure that if he attacked Yamamoto now, he would be able to kill him in one blow. However, the serious situation made Aizen let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. After Yamamoto died, he would have to face Dustless alone. He would die without a doubt. Chapter 1084. Looking at Dustless's attitude, Aizen was happy. Through Dustless's words, he knew how to create a perfect Hogyoku. So that's how it is. Merging with Urahara Kisuke's Hogyoku can create a perfect Hogyoku. Thousands of doubts disappeared, and the puzzle in his heart disappeared with the wind. Aizen was very relaxed, and his face was full of joy. Dustless smiled and didn't say anything. Dustless felt the Ryatsu in his body, and his eyes were cold. Aizen and Yamamoto could test the effect of the Hogyoku. I also want to see how good the Hogyoku is. Aizen's eyes were like torches, and his Ryatsu surged. His Ryatsu was stronger than all the captains, causing Yamamoto to frown. Yamamoto looked at Aizen with a different expression. He didn't expect this gentle captain to have such a strong Ryatsu. No one in the Godai 13 could compete with him. Aizen pointed his thumb to the sky and began to chant, faintly revealing the turbid emblem, the ability to be unruly and arrogant. Tide, negation, paralysis, for a moment. Know your own powerlessness. 890, Black Coffin. After he finished his chant, Sosuke Aizen revealed a cold smile. He suddenly looked at the sky, and countless sharp black lights poured down, decorating the demonic afterglow. It could tear a human's body to pieces. My black coffin can easily kill a grand void like Vasto Lord. Even if you fused with Hogyoku, it won't be easy for you to get hit. Aizen laughed inside, full of pride. For hundreds of years, he worked hard to improve his strength. His strength was far beyond the other captains of the Godai 13. Such a boring attack. Are you kidding me? The cold words made Aizen's mouth twitch. He sneered, is that so? I hope you won't be torn apart by this trick. Dustless was silent, and he closed his eyes. At the same time, the huge black coffin wrapped around him. Poochie, Poochie, Poochie. The interior of the black coffin was sinister and decaying. Countless black blades slashed at the same time. There was only one target, Dustless. Tens of thousands of blades attacked him at the same time. Ka. Dustless didn't dodge or evade. He didn't use his elemental transformation, nor did he use his divinity. He just stood there quietly, bathed in the thousands of cold light attacks. The moment the black blades came into contact with Dustless's body, they all collapsed and shattered. The high-density white spiritual pressure covering Dustless's skin was similar to Void Steel skin, but its hardness was completely different. In this state, Dustless had completely transcended the dimension of Shinigami and Hollow. Aizen Sosuke was delusional to think that he could hurt Dustless in a higher dimension. Therefore, there was no need to dodge at all. The black coffin had no effect on Dustless. It didn't even tickle him. At least, it could make Dustless feel that someone was touching him. While being attacked by the black coffin, he didn't feel anything at all. It was as if nothing was there. It was just that the sky darkened. Let's stop here. Looking around, Dustless saw that the blades had stopped. He waved his hand, and a violent hurricane roared out. Ka. The moment the hurricane came out of Dustless's hand, it was magnified hundreds of times, and its power was also the same. It instantly destroyed the black coffin, and the sky became clear again. He's not injured at all? How is this possible? Seeing that Dustless was fine, Aizen Sosuke was stunned. His hand holding the Zanpakudo trembled, and his Kyoka Sujutsu almost fell down. He looked at Dustless as if he saw a ghost. He clearly heard the ka sound coming from inside the black coffin. Yamamoto was silent, but from his trembling lips, it wasn't difficult to see that his heart was also in turmoil. This guy didn't make any evasive moves, and he didn't use any tricks. He just relied on the hardness of his body to withstand the attack of Hado 90. Head Captain Yamamoto, who had sharp eyes, instantly saw through the trick. Yamamoto's face was gloomy, and he suddenly wished that he didn't understand anything. Sometimes, knowing the truth made him feel heavier than ever. Dustless's white steel skin was enough to easily defend against any attack. For the time being, Aizen was still in the Shinigami's dimension. It was tantamount to a fantasy for him to cause any substantial damage to Dustless. Any of his physical attacks, Dustless didn't need to defend. The gap is too big, your attacks don't work on me at all. Dustless glanced at Aizen and said in a low voice. His tone was full of disdain. He looked at Aizen as if he was looking at an ant. You, hearing this, Aizen's old face turned green. He was always the one who treated others like ants, but this time, he and Dustless switched positions. What's worse, this was an undeniable fact. He didn't waste time talking nonsense with Aizen, he gently raised his thumb, and a huge golden light appeared. What a strong power, what level of Heido is this? Staring at the flash condensed by Wu Qin, Head Captain Yamamoto speculated. The sharpness of this energy ball was beyond any Dao breaker he had ever known. The small ball was only the size of a palm, but it dyed the sky within tens of kilometers of Soul Society golden. No, it doesn't seem to be Heido. Noticing the strange Ryatsu in Dustless's body, Aizen was keenly aware of a bloodthirsty wild wave that wanted to destroy everything in the world. It was extremely evil. This seems to be Void Flash. Chapter 1085. Aizen was very excited. Dustless's combat power was far beyond his expectations. When he completes his Hogyoku, he will reach the same level as Dustless. A flash of light appeared, and the shadow of death covered Aizen Sosuke. His impassioned heart vanished. Being targeted by the flash, Aizen Sosuke instinctively hid behind Head Captain Yamamoto. This exaggerated golden void flash refreshed Aizen and Yamamoto's understanding. Dustless kept transferring Ryatsu to void flash, and the void flash reached a qualitative change. After the dazzling light, it reached its limit and made a series of roars. Dustless glanced at Aizen, Yamamoto Motosuke, and Willow Chiguni without the slightest emotion. Dustless flicked out void flash. Kakaka! The golden light flashed and disappeared. They couldn't see what it looked like. They could only see a thick beam of light that exploded along the way. This level of void flash, Yamamoto's face sank. He gave up on the idea of using Bakudo. It would only be embarrassing. With a low shout, Ryujin Jaka spewed out a flame that gathered on the blade. The temperature was so hot that Dustless, who was hundreds of meters away, trembled. This old guy. As expected of someone who could defeat someone like Yawach. He deserves the title of the strongest Shinigami. Dustless nodded after seeing the sharpness of Ryujin Jaka's blade. This was just the beginning. After a while, Ryujin Jaka's blade showed an even stranger scene. The flames around Ryujin Jaka's blade were all compressed into the blade. What's going on? The Ryatsu didn't change, and it's not Bankai. Dustless thought to himself. He stared at Yamamoto's next move with anticipation. The stronger the enemy, the better. It would be best if he could feel the danger of death, so that he could use the power of the Hogyoku to evolve. At the same time, under the gaze of Dustless and Aizen, Yamamoto's long hair fluttered in the wind. He stared at the incoming light without fear and calmly raised Ryujin Jaka. As Void Flash approached, Head Captain Yamamoto swung his Zanpakudo. Boom boom boom. The moment it hit Void Flash, the dry body of Flowing Edge Jaka's blade suddenly erupted with a terrifying amount of explosive flames. It was so hot that even the sky was melting and peeling off layer by layer. Before Void Flash could explode, it was burned by the flames released by Flowing Jaka and disappeared without a trace. I see. Seeing this scene, Dustless was relieved. He suddenly remembered that the Ryujin Jaka was a sword of fire, capable of erasing everything it touched. Sealing all the flames into the Zanpakudo, once it is swung, everything will be over and everything will be burned to ashes. This is the horror of Ryujin Jaka. Everything it touches will be turned to ashes. This is interesting. The stronger you are, the happier I will be. Dustless was overjoyed when he saw this. The Hogyoku was like this. If he wanted to improve, he must have a strong opponent. Good opportunity. You dare to be distracted while fighting with the head captain? You're amazing. Seeing Dustless was distracted, Aizen admired him from the bottom of his heart. Normal people would be 120% alert when facing the head captain, only Dustless dared to be so daring. Then, under the head captain's confused gaze, Aizen stood in front of Dustless. You traitor, the head captain is a kind person, and you owe him a lot, but in the end, you betrayed Soul Society and turned against the Shinigami, shameless. Aizen Sosuke was the first to accuse him of evil. Come here. Dustless glanced at Aizen and curled his finger. He didn't even bother to call him by his name. Bastard. Hearing this, Aizen Sosuke's face turned red. He gritted his teeth and roared. It was ironic to be called an ant in such a big way. Sosuke Aizen's pride was shattered into pieces. If he wanted to heal it, he'd have to kill Dustless. In that case, let's try the strength of an ant. Spiritual pressure surged like a waterfall. Aizen's palm flashed with countless lights. Hado 91, Thousand Hands Bright Sky Cannon. A large number of pink lights shot out. The number of them was enough to make people despair. The momentum was spectacular. They all rushed towards Dustless. Boom, boom, boom. The dense light all hit Dustless, splashing a huge aftershock. The destructive impact extended to the distant sky. Countless flashes caused a series of explosions. In just a few minutes, the void where Dustless was standing was filled with violent explosions. Dustless's indifferent eyes looked straight ahead, surrounded by a sea of fire, but he didn't react at all. He was just looking for Aizen's trace. He completely ignored the pink light that hit his body. Where did that sneaky guy go? Dustless couldn't help but murmur. After searching for a long time, he couldn't find any trace of Aizen. When he was about to use his observation hockey to look for Aizen, a sharp light came from behind him. Go to hell! Aizen, holding Kyoka Sujutsu, fell from the sky. His spiritual pressure was pushed to the limit, and his Zanpakuto slashed towards Dustless. Crack! A crisp sound suddenly came. Aizen thought that Dustless's head would be separated, but who would have thought that his Zanpakuto would be chipped? On the other hand, Dustless was safe and sound. The Ryatsu outside his body was enough to ignore all physical attacks. Chapter 1086. Aizen Sosuke looked at the cracked Zanpakuto in disbelief. He was so shocked that his jaw almost dislocated. He used Kyoka Suigetsu to attack someone else. Dustless himself was fine, but his Kyoka Suigetsu was cracked. One could imagine how shocked he was. You're still far from being able to stand on this stage. Raising his eyebrows, Dustless, who was still in the Hogyoku cradle state, stepped forward and heavily injured Aizen Sosuke, sending him straight to hell. Pucci! The hot Zanpakuto heavily injured Aizen Sosuke and opened a giant hole in his chest. Not only that, Dustless pulled out his Kusanagi sword and kicked Aizen Sosuke away. A pink disc of flames flew out. Hado 54, Flame Destruction. The pink flame disc penetrated Aizen Sosuke's body before he could even react. Pucci! Bright red blood spurted into the air and an arm fell to the ground. You bastard! I'll kill you! Aizen Sosuke looked up and saw that Dustless cut his left arm. If Aizen Sosuke didn't dodge in time, he would have been cut in half. Go to hell! He glanced at Aizen Sosuke indifferently. His golden flash roared and approached Aizen Sosuke in an instant. However, a figure blocked Aizen Sosuke's path in time. He waved his Zanpakuto and dissolved the golden flash. Boom, boom, boom. The blazing flames incinerated Void Flash. Old Man Yamamoto stood in front of Aizen Sosuke. He was the one who had saved Sosuke's life at the last moment. If this old man knew that Aizen Sosuke betrayed Soul Society and almost killed him, wouldn't he be so depressed that he vomited blood? Ignoring Old Man Yamamoto's gaze, he raised his Kusanpakuto again. A huge golden light gathered at the tip of the sword. So. The terrifying luster of destruction almost filled the entire sky of Soul Society, and the entire sky was replaced by this terrifying and biting cold light. This guy is too dangerous. Seeing this, Yamamoto didn't hesitate to release his Zanpakuto. Bankai, Zanpakuto Tachi. As the vigorous and old voice fell, the flowing edge Jaka was instantly charred, giving off a wisp of hot steam. The captain actually used Bankai. Aizen Sosuke, who was hiding behind Yamamoto, was shocked. He stared at the burnt Zanpakuto. He could clearly feel that the water in Soul Society was slowly evaporating. Water was the source of all things. Once it was completely lost, it was self-evident what it meant. The collapse of Soul Society was close at hand. A powerful aura of destruction gathered at the tip of the blade. Head Captain Yamamoto stared at the huge attack coming at him. In the end, a huge blade aura swept out from the tip of the blade. Zanpakuto Tachi, Heaven and Earth. Sosuke's Zanpakuto made contact with Dustless's Zanpakuto's Zanpakuto Tachi didn't even explode. The explosion, the Zanpakuto's Zanpakuto Tachi, was directly shredded. Not even the slightest trace was left. Sosuke's handsome face was almost distorted, looking at his broken left arm and the hole in his chest. If he hadn't gone through hundreds of years of training, he would have died already. Sosuke clenched his fists. His face was full of unwillingness. He thought that even without the Hogyoku, his strength was not much different from the captain's, but this situation was far beyond his imagination. What a powerful power! Dustless's pupils shrank as he was envious. He immediately saw the hot Zanpakuto's Zanpakuto Tachi sweeping towards him. He didn't even have time to react before the Zanpakuto Tachi swallowed him. Puchi! The invincible defensive Ryatsu coat was shattered easily like an eggshell. The left half of Wu Chen's body was also erased directly. This should be the end of it. Yamamoto breathed a sigh of relief. However, Dustless's next sentence sent him to hell. And? Are you kidding me? You want to kill me? Dream on. With a contemptuous smile, Dustless's left body began to slowly recover. The Jubi is immortal, all injuries can be healed. Zanpakuto Tachi. Noticing the evaporation of Soul Society and the abnormality of Ryujin Jaka, Dustless immediately understood that old man Yamamoto released his Zanpakuto. However, at this moment, the Hogyoku in his body burst out with a high density of Ryatsu again. Hogyoku? Is this evolution? It shouldn't be. Only when the host feels the danger of death or has emotions like fear can it evolve. Dustless frowned as he noticed the abnormality of the Hogyoku in his body. Although he was seriously injured, it didn't affect him much, let alone feeling the fear of death, so evolution was nonsense. And this eruption of Ryatsu was far more than before. There was a qualitative change, like an endless ocean. Dustless is the Jubi, his body is strong enough, otherwise he will definitely explode. Unprecedented terrifying Ryatsu floated all over his body, and the storm produced directly forced Yamamoto to retreat. Just when Dustless was about to go all out and sweep the entire Soul Society into the garbage dump of history, a huge Tianju chariot suddenly flashed in the sky, and several unfamiliar figures jumped down. Among them, there were two women that Dustless knew. So it's Team Zero, you came at the right time. I don't need to find a way to kill my way to the Spirit King Palace. The Ryatsu armor covering his face broke again, revealing Dustless's cold face, and his pupils changed, emitting a strange luster. Just now, he received the Hogyoku's Ryatsu and evolved again. Chapter 1087. The people who suddenly appeared were all wearing the same uniform, all captains Haori, and the badge behind them were also the same. Several members of Team Zero were all present: Hattori Department's Ishii, Naomiya's Wang Yu, Kirin Temple's Tenshiro, as well as Dustless's acquaintances, Shutoro Senjumaru and Seo Toshio. You were forced to use Bankai, you're really embarrassed, Genryusai. Kirin Temple's Tenshiro stood up and said sarcastically. It sounded like he was mocking Yamamoto, but in fact, he was looking at Dustless from the corner of his eyes. In the end, his face was completely gloomy. The two of them mentioned you before. I thought you would be loyal to Soul Society, but now your performance is too disappointing. We even tried to recruit you into Team Zero. Why did you betray Shinigami? Why did you betray Soul Society? Why did you betray Soul Lord? Hattori Department's Ishii gritted his teeth and said, almost roaring in the end. Dustless looked at Shutaro Senjumaru's slightly complicated face. The killing intent on his face disappeared, and his indifferent voice softened a little. With an apologetic tone, he said, I'm sorry. As Dustless's spiritual pressure was extinguished, so was Yamamoto's. The scene stopped for a while, and Soul Society, which was being crushed by spiritual pressure, finally returned to a temporary calm. Soul Society has been good to you, and we didn't do anything wrong to you. Why did you do this? Shotaro Senjumaru asked. She was the one who tried to recruit Dustless into Team Zero. Looking around at the fallen Shinigami, and all the captains who were killed, Shotaro Senjumaru's eyes flashed with surprise, and said angrily, "Now you actually annihilated all the Shinigami." Seeing this, the members of Team Zero showed murderous intent, and at the same time, they were secretly surprised by Dustless's combat power. Looking at Old Man Yamamoto's tired appearance, they all looked solemn. There is no doubt that the combat power of Team Zero is higher than the entire Godai 13, but that's if all the members of Team Zero are combined. Whether they can beat Old Man Yamamoto one-on-one is still a question. Looking at the situation now, Old Man Yamamoto was forced to use Bankai. His opponent didn't even use his Zanpakuto. I've said it before, I don't want to be enemies with the Grim Reaper. Dustless shook his head and reiterated once again. I don't want to be enemies with the Grim Reaper. I also don't want to kill the Spirit King. Whether he lives or dies has nothing to do with me. My only goal is to strip the Spirit King of his title and replace him with me in the end. Wu Chen said softly, as if it was a trivial matter. He was very calm and relaxed. These deranged words stunned everyone. Only Head Captain Yamamoto and a few members of Squad Zero heard it. As for Sosuke Aizen, he was seriously injured by Dustless and is now unconscious. Do you even understand what you are saying? Do you know what Spirit King means to Soul Society? Lord Spirit King's existence symbolizes the existence of the entire world. If the Spirit King were to disappear, everything would vanish into thin air. Wang Yu, who had the title of Knife God, said angrily. The Spirit King was finished. Everything would turn into a bubble. You're called the God of Broadswords. It seems that you don't live up to your name. After all, you're just an ordinary man with shallow knowledge. Glancing at Wang Yu, Dustless simply ignored him and explained. Spirit King is the chisel of everything. It can even be said that he's the cornerstone of the world. But he's also the Grim Reaper's biggest weakness. Hearing this, the members of Squad Zero couldn't help but stagnate. They confessed to Dustless's words. Because they have to protect the Spirit King, the Grim Reaper wants to be restrained. Dealing with all enemies is based on protecting the Spirit King. And the Spirit King himself has no fighting power. He's a burden to Squad Zero. After all, they have to constantly protect the Spirit King, so they can't get away. If I become the Spirit King, I don't need to say it, you know what it means. The corner of his mouth raised, Dustless smiled and said bewitchingly, Your Squad Zero can get rid of the restraints and have no worries. You can use all your strength to deal with Yawach. You even know about Yoch. The members of Squad Zero were stunned. They all lowered their heads at the same time. Their eyes flickered. If there's no Spirit King, their Squad Zero and the Grim Reaper of Soul Society can use all their strength to deal with their comrade Yosh. This is an undeniable advantage. And it's not difficult to see that Dustless himself has a strong fighting power. The Spirit King is built to stabilize the soul. You think you can replace him just because you say so? Sayaso sneered. Looking at Dustless's face, she suddenly remembered that she was molested by Dustless. She suddenly became angry. Don't say no. Even if you can, if you want to be the Spirit King, I'll be the first to disagree. A woman's view. She glanced at Zhou Tongxing, and Wu Chen knew that she wanted to take revenge. To be honest, he didn't want to make things difficult for the Grim Reaper. However, Dustless is not the kind of person who is born to be someone's subordinate, even if it's the Spirit King. Dustless just wants to become the Spirit King and seize his power. In a sense, the Spirit King is a collection of souls. Its role is even greater than the Hogyoku. Soul Society is a place where Ryatsu is used. What determines the amount of Ryatsu is a person's soul. It seems that there is no room for negotiation. Looking at the members of Squad Zero and Head Captain Yamamoto, Dustless saw that they were indifferent and unmoved. Dustless understood that wasting half a day of words before will not have any effect. The vigorous Ryatsu in his body surged again. Just as he was about to kill them, a sudden change occurred. Dustless's pupils shrank. He stared at the Hogyoku in his body. He was keenly aware that something was wrong. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.